At a high school, students were walking into the yard on a beautiful sunny day. Inside the crowded cafeteria, a bustling line of people queued for lunch. A chubby friend brought a food tray to the table, trying to wake up his dozing friend, Gavin Clark. The kind friend urged Gavin to wake up and eat, saying he had brought the food. Seeing Gavin still fast asleep, his friend sighed, thinking Gavin must have been exhausted from staying up late talking with Xenia Scott. Gavin slowly woke up in a daze, wondering where he was as an enticing aroma filled his nostrils. His eyes were fixed on the lavish food tray in front of him, astonished to realize it was rice and various dishes. He suddenly sprang up, lunging towards the food tray with a look of astonishment, startling a nearby female student. With bright eyes, Gavin braced his hands on the table, staring at both meals like a hungry beast, alarming his friend. Without hesitation, Gavin snatched a chicken drumstick and began to devour it ravenously. His friend, Yaniel Parker, anxiously yelled, telling Gavin to eat slower lest he choke. Witnessing the scene, Yaniel angrily jumped up, shouting that it was his meal. After clearing both food trays, Gavin let out a satisfied sigh, rubbed his full belly, and whispered that he had truly returned. He couldn't believe this truth, that he had truly been reborn. Yaniel confusedly asked Gavin if he was full, grumbling that he ate like a hungry ghost from his past life, even eating his portion. Gavin calmly admitted that he had indeed reincarnated from a hungry ghost. With cold eyes, he revealed that during the icy deluge in his past life, he had died of starvation. Yaniel was completely bewildered, hastily asking what was wrong, guessing if Xenia had broken up with Gavin. Gavin interrupted his friend by placing a hand on his shoulder. With a serious expression, Gavin called Yaniel Parker by name, asserting that it was great he was still alive and they could start over to reclaim everything. Yaniel Parker annoyedly told Gavin to stop being creepy, asserting that of course he was still alive. Gavin hastily grabbed his friend's shoulders, urgently asking for the current date, and Yaniel blankly replied that today was the 8th of August 2024. In his mind, Gavin envisioned an icy future, warning that in just half a month, the world would plunge into an ice age, with temperatures dropping to minus 50 degrees. Yaniel thought his friend was talking nonsense in the middle of a 40-degree summer, worriedly asking if Gavin was in trouble and promising to help him sort it out. Gavin turned away, confirming that he truly needed help, and Yaniel happily agreed due to their close relationship. Immediately, Gavin turned back and made a shocking request, to lend him 1 billion, causing Yaniel, who was drinking water, to spit it out in astonishment. Yaniel stammered, asking if Gavin was serious, and received a firm affirmation from his friend. Resolutely refusing, Yaniel declared that 1 billion was an unimaginable sum, to the point that even selling his own father wouldn't be enough. Gavin immediately retorted, asking how much Yaniel's father could be sold for, and received an awkward reply that it would be 500 million at most. Gavin then criticized Yaniel for daring to sell his own father, making his friend furious at the absurdity. Just then, a couple walked past. The blonde-haired man Zach Young whispered to the red-haired girl Xenia that he had booked a private room for her. Gavin and Yaniel's eyes were immediately drawn to the newly appeared couple. Zach smugly promised Xenia an evening at a private cinema, and she responded flirtatiously. Yaniel frantically recognized and informed Gavin that it was Xenia Scott cheating with Zach Young, the young master of the vast dragon group. Gavin and Yaniel immediately blocked the couple's path, creating a tense confrontation. Caught red-handed, Xenia Scott appeared utterly astonished and flustered upon seeing Gavin. Yaniel couldn't contain his anger, loudly questioning Xenia about her betrayal after all Gavin had sacrificed. However, Xenia merely crossed her arms and smiled defiantly, nonchalantly admitting that everything was exactly as Gavin had seen. A flood of painful memories from his past life rushed into Gavin's mind, of Xenia betraying him repeatedly, ultimately abandoning him to starve to death. While Yaniel urged his friend to leave, Gavin maintained an unusually calm demeanor, smiling and saying there was no need to rush. Yaniel Parker angrily yelled, not understanding why Gavin still wanted to stay, when just looking at Xenia made him sick. Zach Young put his arm around Xenia, sneeringly mocking Gavin as an annoying lovesick fool, like a dung beetle, according to her. Xenia continued, bluntly declaring that Gavin's previous actions were merely harassment, and she found them disgusting. Gavin coldly interrupted her, asking a concise question. Are you done talking? While Zach continued to provoke, Xenia clung tightly to him, asserting that even if Gavin knelt, she wouldn't care because Zach was her true soulmate. Yaniel anxiously urged his friend to leave to avoid humiliation, but Gavin calmly asked for 5 more minutes. Faced with his friend's stubbornness, Yaniel desperately wondered why a good person like Gavin couldn't see through Xenia's true colors. Hearing this, Zach scoffed, challenging that if Gavin could entertain them for 5 minutes, he would reward him with a used piece of toilet paper. Immediately, a resounding slap echoed, Gavin having struck first to everyone's astonishment. Xenia shrieked Zach's name in horror, her face distraught at her ex-boyfriend's sudden action. Yaniel and the surrounding students were stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. Clutching his reddened cheek, Zach glared furiously, growling how Gavin dared to hit him. He lunged forward wildly, screaming that he would kill Gavin, who remained calmly still. Without needing to dodge, Gavin delivered a thunderous kick directly to Zach's face and loudly yelled at him to get lost. Yaniel broke out in a cold sweat, utterly stunned by the terrifying power his friend had just displayed. As Zach fell face first to the floor, Xenia rushed over to help him, anxiously asking about his condition. She turned to threaten Gavin, reminding him that he had touched the heir of the vast dragon group, but Zach merely pushed her away. Confident in his martial arts skills, Zach once again lunged to attack, shouting that he was a Taekwondo black belt. But Gavin easily blocked the attack and then delivered a decisive punch to Zach's face, contemptuously calling him trash. Standing over his unconscious rival's body, Gavin mused that thanks to the cultivation techniques he learned during the apocalypse, dealing with a braggart like Zach was no challenge at all. Yaniel Parker was stunned, unable to believe his eyes as he asked Gavin when he became so cool. Meanwhile, Xenia Scott knelt beside the unconscious Zach Young, furiously calling Gavin a savage and threatening that he would regret it. She stood up, pointed directly at Gavin's face, and ordered him to kneel and apologize to Zach, or she would never forgive him. In response to the threat, Gavin delivered a thunderous slap across Xenia's face, coldly asking her who she thought she was. Zach Young, now struggling to his feet, furiously declared that he would use everything he had to crush Gavin like an ant, but his threat was immediately silenced by a powerful punch to the stomach from Gavin, making him cough up blood. Taking advantage of Zach's collapse, Gavin quickly snatched a small spray bottle from his jacket pocket and smirked, pleased to have found it. Zach frantically lunged forward, yelling at Gavin to return the item. Gavin held up the spray bottle, sarcastically asking Zach if he felt guilty after using this to harm so many girls. The deranged young master furiously lunged to attack, still vehemently denying everything, and demanding Gavin return the item to him. Without a moment's hesitation, Gavin sprayed the chemical from the bottle directly into Zach's face, making him scream in horror that Gavin was crazy. Zach clutched his head, howling in extreme pain, while Xenia behind him was bewildered, not understanding what was happening. When Xenia nervously approached, Zach, losing his mind, violently pushed her away, screaming for her to stay away from him. Zach's eyes were bloodshot, his pupils constricted, showing the signs of someone who had completely lost his sanity. Like a wild beast, Zach roared and charged straight at Xenia, knocking away the surrounding students. He grabbed Xenia's dress and violently tore it apart. Xenia was utterly terrified, begging Zach to stop because they were in the middle of the cafeteria. Ignoring her pleas, Zach continued his bestial behavior, forcing Xenia to desperately cry for help. Amidst the chaotic scene, Gavin calmly placed a hand on Yaniel's shoulder, announcing that 5 minutes were up and it was time to leave, abandoning his still bewildered best friend. He held up the spray bottle and explained that it was a powerful aphrodisiac, something Zach often used to harm others, and this time, Gavin was simply letting him get a taste of his own medicine. Addressing Yaniel's concern that Zach might call the police, Gavin confidently explained that Zach would never dare expose his dirty secret weapon. He smirked, asserting that with the pride of an heir, Zach would surely come seeking revenge himself. Yaniel thoughtfully nodded, finally understanding that given Zach's personality, he would only seek to settle things privately with Gavin. The two walked out of the chaotic cafeteria together, Yaniel curiously asking about their next destination. Gavin turned back with a radiant smile, boldly declaring his shocking goal: to sell the house. They quickly arrived at a real estate agency, and Yaniel could only utter his friend's name in bewilderment. Despite Yaniel's desperate pleas against selling his parents' only memento, Gavin resolutely signed the contract. Deep down, he had a clear plan: to use the $3.1 million he obtained to stock up on supplies, preparing for the impending icy apocalypse. After completing the procedures with the female agent, Gavin calmly received the documents, even though Yaniel still couldn't comprehend his hasty actions. Leaving the office, Gavin eagerly urged them to the next stop, leaving Yaniel still utterly confused. With an excited smile, Gavin declared his next plan was simply to spend money. Their destination was a massive supermarket, where Gavin's stockpiling plan was about to begin. He didn't hesitate to ask the staff for 1,000 bags each of rice, flour, and cooking oil. Not stopping there, he also ordered 10,000 cans of each type of canned goods. The female supermarket employee was stunned by the enormous order, unable to believe her ears, and had to ask for confirmation. Gavin confidently confirmed with his arms crossed, while Yaniel gaped, asking his friend if he was stockpiling for an entire supermarket. When Gavin inquired about delivery service, The female employee cheerfully assured him that they could handle everything from A to Z. Gavin then turned to Yaniel, asking about his family's vacant warehouse in the suburbs, making Yaniel suddenly realize his friend's intention. He slung an arm around his best friend, asserting that he would borrow that warehouse and continue shopping even more. Just then, two female classmates recognized Gavin and began to mock him, sarcastically bringing up how Xenia had cheated on him and questioning his financial capability. Ignoring the taunts, Gavin Clark continued his apocalypse shopping spree, asking the staff for dozens of expensive electronic devices. He smirked, calculating that when the world was plunged into ice and snow, these entertainment devices would be indispensable for long days indoors. The female employee was overjoyed to have met the biggest customer of the year, while the two female classmates stood behind, dumbfounded with astonishment. They couldn't believe that a penniless person like Gavin could splurge hundreds of thousands on such luxurious items. Not stopping there, Gavin continued to point, ordering all the devices and thermal puffer jackets to be packaged. The purple-haired girl was aghast, realizing that the amount Gavin had spent had exceeded 1 million. Immediately, she came to the only conclusion. Gavin was a rich young master in disguise, and this was a golden opportunity. While Gavin was satisfied with his preparations, the purple-haired girl quietly approached. A sweet voice called his name, causing a sharp glint to flash in Gavin's eyes. The two girls had now changed their attitude, surrounding Gavin with compliments about his appearance. Dark memories from his past life flooded back, and Gavin recalled their identities. Sharon Zeller and Jolene Little, the ones who had robbed him and left him to freeze to death. Sharon Zeller continued to entice him, inviting Gavin to eat to break the distant silence. Gavin gave a meaningful smile, agreed, and instructed Yaniel to take the items home first as he had something to do. Believing their prey had taken the bait, Sharon and Jolene revealed their true colors, gleefully planning to fleece Gavin at a luxurious restaurant. Gavin cheerfully linked arms with both of them, playing the role of a hungry fool, ready to be led away. They approached a skyscraper, a symbol of luxury and expense. Sharon and Jolene incessantly praised the restaurant, urging Gavin to quickly go inside to show off his status. Inside the splendid space, one of the two girls asked Gavin how he felt about the food there. Holding the menu, Gavin smiled mysteriously and casually remarked, asking if it wasn't a bit too expensive. In response to Gavin's question, Jolene Little and Sharon Zeller immediately scoffed, saying that nothing was expensive, and if he wouldn't order, they would. Jolene immediately ordered the most luxurious items on the menu, from black and gold caviar to M12, Wagyu beef, and Antarctic lobster. An hour later, Sharon Zeller sat amidst a table full of empty plates, contentedly exclaiming that it had been a long time since she had eaten so well. When Sharon inquired, Gavin stood up and replied that the meal was delicious and he needed to step out for a moment. Gavin walked directly to the reception desk of the luxurious restaurant. Instead of paying the $18,800 bill, he stunned the female employee by requesting 100 identical banquet tables to be prepared for him to pick up in 10 days. The bewildered receptionist's jaw dropped, and she stammered, asking if he was sure about such a massive order. Gavin calmly presented a gleaming gold VIP card, confirming his ability to pay up front. In his mind, he recalled the days of the apocalypse when he had to eat canned food until he was sick of it, and he resolved to stockpile these banquets to ensure his quality of life. Meanwhile, Jolene and Sharon watched Gavin's retreating back, secretly considering him a foolish rich man and planning to exploit him for more shopping. The receptionist returned to their table, happily announcing that the order for 100 banquet tables had been confirmed, and then gently mentioned the bill for their meal. Gavin coldly tossed the card towards the staff, decisively declaring that the two girls could pay for themselves. He smiled smugly, thinking to himself that the money from selling the house was almost gone, and it was time to find some loan platforms. Immediately, Gavin accessed a lending website on his phone. He told himself he couldn't stop. After withdrawing $2.7 million from 36 platforms, there were still many more places to exploit. Just then, his phone rang with the caller ID, Sharon Zeller. On the other end, Sharon furiously yelled, asking where Gavin was, with Jolene and the restaurant staff waiting behind her. Gavin simply smiled and casually lied that he had an urgent matter and was on his way home. With a provocative smirk, he ended the call with a question. Why should I pay? On the other end, Sharon Zeller shrieked in anger, questioning why Gavin wasn't paying for the meal he had invited them to. Gavin Clark casually retorted, exposing that the two girls had dragged him there and ordered the most expensive dishes themselves. Sharon was stunned into silence, stammering if Gavin was really making her and Jolene Little pay this exorbitant bill. Gavin merely scoffed, sarcastically remarking that he had warned them beforehand, but they still deliberately chose the most luxurious items. Cornered, Sharon began to insult him, calling Gavin a penniless loser with more pride than sense. However, Gavin's words over the phone stunned her when he told her to ask the staff if he had ordered 100 identical banquet tables, and the receptionist smilingly confirmed it. Sharon's expression immediately changed. She switched to a pleading tone, begging Gavin to return and pay, believing he couldn't possibly be short of money for such a small meal. Gavin coldly hung up, disdainfully stating that he wouldn't indulge rotten fools. When the receptionist sternly informed them that the restaurant did not allow credit, Sharon and Jolene were completely thrown into panic. Fury erupted, and Sharon decided to call someone named Hunter to teach Gavin a lesson he wouldn't forget. Meanwhile, Gavin stood before a lottery ticket vendor, another plan forming in his mind. He smiled confidently, recalling memories from his past life of winning a grand prize at this exact time. Holding the lottery ticket he had just bought, Gavin knew he only had to wait patiently for 2 more days to have a massive capital. He returned to the warehouse and called his close friend, Yaniel Parker, who was sitting exhausted on the floor. Yaniel immediately grumbled about being abandoned by his friend for a fancy meal, but Gavin just smiled and promised to take him out for some excitement that evening. Standing amidst the warehouse filled with goods, Yaniel couldn't understand why Gavin was wasting money on these things. Gavin seriously explained that when the ice apocalypse arrived, these would be life-saving items, and earnestly asked his friend to trust him. Yaniel gave a strained laugh, admitting he couldn't believe this crazy story even though Gavin looked perfectly normal. Gavin just smiled meaningfully, confidently stating that there was no need to rush. In just a few more days, Yaniel would have to believe him. As they left the warehouse, Gavin Clark and Yaniel Parker were blocked by a group of thugs, the leader confirming Gavin's identity. Gavin calmly admitted it, simultaneously guessing they were Hunter Walsh's henchmen. The bald-headed thug swung a baseball bat, mocking Gavin as a poor student who dared to mess with Hunter's woman. Panicked by the situation, Yaniel quickly tried to intervene and threatened to call the police. The bald-headed thug and the blonde man just laughed, daring them to break their legs before the police could arrive. However, Gavin smiled and stopped his friend, telling him not to call the police. The thugs assumed he was scared, mocking that it would be useless even if he did call. In desperation, Yaniel tried to negotiate using his status as the son of the owner of Parker's building materials. The bald-headed thug recognized the Parker heir but dismissed him, stating their only target today was Gavin Clark. Knowing they couldn't be swayed, Yaniel yelled for Gavin to run while he held them off. The blonde man shoved Yaniel aside, while the bald-headed thug roared, swinging his bat directly at Gavin's head. Yaniel could only scream his friend's name in terror. Gavin coolly dodged the blow with ease, criticizing the swing as too slow and lacking technique. Immediately, he delivered a devastating kick to the bald-headed thug's stomach, causing him to drop the baseball bat. The thug coughed up blood, unable to believe what had just happened. Gavin seized the opportunity, picked up the bat, and swung it directly at the thug's face, leaving him no time to utter a curse. The brutal blow ended with the bat being jammed deep into the bald-headed thug's mouth, breaking all his teeth. The remaining henchmen were stunned into silence, horrified by how ruthlessly this teenager acted. With a provocative smile, Gavin slung the bat over his shoulder and challenged them all to attack at once. Angered by Gavin's challenge, the blonde thug roared, inciting his comrades to charge and kill him. However, Gavin just grinned excitedly, swinging the baseball bat and easily taking down the entire group. Yaniel Parker was stunned into silence, unable to believe his eyes that his gentle friend could handle 6 thugs alone. Standing amidst the fallen bodies, Gavin coldly asked if they had surrendered, and they quickly admitted defeat. Immediately after, he held out his phone, demanding that each of them transfer $100,000 to him. When the blonde guy dared to call this extortion, Gavin didn't say a word, and forcefully shoved the end of the stick into his stomach. He gritted his teeth and warned that they were the ones who started the trouble, and if they didn't pay, he would break all 3 of each man's legs. Immediately, Gavin's account received a notification that $600,000 had been added. He told himself that he wasn't malicious, but merely possessed the mindset of a student who had long died after surviving the apocalypse. Gavin put his arm around the still bewildered Yaniel, promising to take him somewhere truly interesting. That place turned out to be a luxurious nightclub, dazzling with lights and hot dancers. Yaniel was immediately captivated by the lively atmosphere, exclaiming that this was a great place to relieve stress. However, Gavin went straight to the bar and told the female employee that he was there to deliver goods to her boss, Mr. Jacobs. The two were led into a deep inner corridor, guarded by dozens of menacing bodyguards in black suits. Yaniel trembled with fear, stammering to ask if this was the interesting place Gavin had mentioned, and his friend only replied with a mysterious smile. In a panic, Yaniel screamed that his heart was about to explode from fear and demanded to know what the hell Gavin was doing here. Just then, the bodyguards simultaneously bowed to an elderly, silver-haired man who had just appeared, respectfully calling him Mr. Lowe. Mr. Lowe squinted at Gavin, asking in a deep voice if he was there to deliver goods, as he had never met him before. Gavin smiled confidently, admitting it was their first meeting, and saying that he had come immediately upon hearing that Mr. Lowe was accepting goods. Mr. Lowe frowned suspiciously, asking where two empty-handed teenagers would get merchandise from. Gavin casually replied that the merchandise was themselves, causing Mr. Lowe to burst into delighted laughter, having never met anyone who willingly offered themselves as goods. The smile vanished, and Mr. Lowe growled an order for his armed subordinates to seize them both. With a gun pointed at him, Yaniel Parker panicked completely, hastily boasting about his father's background in hopes of being spared. While Yaniel frantically asked what was happening, Gavin calmly revealed that Mr. Lowe was a human organ trafficker. Yaniel screamed in horror, unable to comprehend how Gavin could remain calm knowing they were about to be cut open for their organs. Gavin ignored his friend, turning to provoke Mr. Lowe, asking if a notorious kingpin would dare to buy this merchandise. Challenged, Mr. Lowe roared that there was nothing he wouldn't dare to buy, and Gavin immediately set the price at $10 million for his entire body. Mr. Lowe disdainfully countered with $5 million, citing the tight market due to heavy crackdowns. Gavin agreed on one condition: receiving the money up front and delivering the goods within 3 days, a deal sealed with a meaningful handshake. Immediately after, Mr. Lowe ordered a subordinate to bring a contract of servitude to force them to sign. Seeing only one contract, Gavin demanded another copy for Yaniel, despite his friend frantically waving his hands in refusal. Gavin coldly dismissed Yaniel's protests, asserting to the bodyguard that he was selling too. The subordinate lost patience, pressed the cold muzzle of the gun directly against Yaniel's head, and growled an order for him to sign. As soon as they left the lion's den, Yaniel immediately exploded, questioning if Gavin was still human for having the heart to sell out his friend. Gavin merely brushed it off, calling it a trivial matter, but Yaniel yelled that Mr. Lowe was a ruthless gang boss who would tear them apart. Gavin's eyes turned icy cold, and he declared that an inhuman monster like Mr. Lowe would die within the next 3 days. Faced with Yaniel's skepticism about confronting an armed man, Gavin only smiled mysteriously and promised to show him the coming apocalypse. The scene shifted to a magnificent villa, where a voice asked if the gentleman was sure he only wanted to rent it. To the real estate agent's astonishment, Gavin Clark insisted that he only wanted to rent this specific villa. Yaniel Parker crossed his arms, wondering why they needed a villa right now, and Gavin just smiled mysteriously, replying that something good was waiting inside. He recalled his previous life, when this very villa was the final refuge, but also the site that witnessed humanity's ultimate degradation, and where he had died. With determined eyes, Gavin resolved that his new life would begin right from the place where he had fallen. When the agent announced that the owner was not renting, Gavin immediately offered to pay double the price. The agent explained that money wasn't the issue, but Gavin quickly raised the price 5-fold. He finalized the offer by proposing to pay 10 times the rent, and could pay immediately. Overwhelmed by the huge sum, the female agent's eyes lit up, and she promised to do everything possible to help Gavin rent the house. Gavin only requested one condition: that he be allowed to renovate the entire property, and the agent happily agreed immediately. Suddenly, Gavin heard a woman urging Xenia Scott to seize the opportunity with Zach Young for the future of both mother and daughter. Yaniel was surprised to recognize Xenia, and Gavin smirked, explaining that Zach Young also owned a villa here. Xenia Scott turned around, her eyes stunned as she realized Gavin's presence. She immediately became furious, pointing at Gavin's face and loudly accusing him of stalking her. Xenia's mother also intervened, insulting Gavin as a poor, infatuated wretch, unworthy of her daughter. She continued her tirade, threatening to complain to the school and call the police to have both Gavin and Yaniel imprisoned. Gavin merely replied sarcastically, asking what his renting a house here had to do with her. Xenia crossed her arms and sneered, mocking that someone who only had a few hundred yuan for living expenses couldn't possibly afford the rent here. Just then, the female agent returned, happily announcing that everything was settled with a rent of 25,000 per month. Xenia's mother froze, her mouth agape in astonishment, unable to believe what she had just heard. Recovering from the shock, Xenia Scott crossed her arms and scoffed, insisting that Gavin rented the villa only because he desperately wanted to pursue her. Gavin merely smiled contemptuously at her insane delusion, while Yaniel beside him had to shout in disbelief. Xenia's mother pulled her daughter away, sneering that with only 25,000 in rent, Gavin wasn't even qualified to pursue her daughter. Immediately, Gavin announced to the agent that he would pay 10 times the amount, 250,000, to finalize the contract right now. Xenia and her mother were stunned. She screamed that Gavin was just putting on an act and couldn't possibly have such a large sum of money. Without another word, Gavin held up his phone, smiling as he announced the successful transfer of 250,000. The agent happily handed the keys to Gavin, and he and Yaniel casually walked away, leaving Xenia and her mother dumbfounded behind them. Xenia's mother was stunned, wondering if they had misjudged Gavin, but Xenia angrily dismissed the thought, insisting he was just an orphan. On the way, Gavin asked Yaniel if he knew the owner of the city's largest interior design company, and his friend confirmed that he did. Gavin immediately asked Yaniel to arrange an appointment to renovate the villa, which further confused Yaniel regarding his friend's incomprehensible plan. With a mysterious smile, Gavin simply asked Yaniel not to ask too many questions, and just arrange the meeting, promising that everything would become clear tonight. Not long after, Yaniel happily reported that his father had used his connections to get the owner of Heaven's Rainbow to postpone everything and meet Gavin privately. Gavin cheerfully announced that he would give Yaniel's father a truckload of instant noodles as thanks, causing Yaniel to panic and object, saying his father never ate junk food. Gavin just smiled confidently, asserting that before long, Yaniel's father would be singing praises about his gift. They quickly arrived in front of the spacious headquarters of the interior design company, Heaven's Rainbow Decor. Meanwhile, inside, Xenia's mother was instructing her daughter to do a good job because Zach Young was paying for the renovation. Just as Gavin and Yaniel walked in, a female receptionist approached to ask if they had an appointment, causing Xenia, who was standing nearby, to turn and look. As soon as she saw Gavin, Xenia immediately accused him of being shameless for stalking her all the way to the interior design company. Gavin could only sigh wearily, wondering why fate kept forcing him to constantly run into this foolish mother and daughter duo. Yaniel Parker was astonished to hear Xenia Scott smugly claim that Gavin was also there for renovations, secretly mocking the fool for fixing a place he didn't own. Completely ignoring her, Gavin Clark loudly informed the female receptionist that he had an appointment. Xenia's mother and daughter watched him suspiciously, believing Gavin was just trying to appear richer than he actually was. Just then, a man whom the receptionist respectfully greeted as Mr. Zhao walked in, asking about the person he had an appointment with. The receptionist immediately pointed toward where Gavin and Xenia's mother and daughter were standing. Xenia's mother was instantly overjoyed, secretly marveling at Zach Young's influence for managing to invite Mr. Zhao of Heaven's Rainbow himself to meet them. She turned to mock Gavin, gloating about the class difference since her daughter was being received by the boss himself while he could only stand and wait. Mistakenly believing this, Xenia immediately stepped forward to greet Mr. Zhao warmly. Mr. Zhao looked confused, asking blankly if she had an appointment with him. Xenia confidently insisted that she was the one who had scheduled the appointment. Mr. Zhao frowned and asked if her name was Gavin Clark, causing Xenia to freeze and quickly deny it, introducing her real name. Hearing this, Mr. Zhao immediately brushed Xenia aside and coldly told her not to interfere in other people's business. Only then did Gavin Clark smile and step forward, introducing himself as Gavin Clark. Mr. Zhao was surprised by Gavin's youth and happily invited him inside to discuss the details, leaving Xenia and her mother stunned. Unable to accept the truth, Xenia furiously concluded that this must be due to Yaniel Parker's family connections, as Gavin couldn't possibly have such influence. The door to the director's office closed behind them. Inside, Mr. Zhao cordially asked the young man Gavin which property he wished to renovate. Gavin smiled confidently, replying that what he wanted to renovate was a villa. Mr. Zhao considered it a minor task and began listing the standard budget packages, suggesting he would let the design director work out the details with him. Gavin Clark confidently suggested that Mr. Zhao should personally discuss this project. Mr. Zhao, somewhat condescendingly, replied that he was very busy and only personally handled major projects. Gavin immediately stood up and asserted that this was indeed a major project, prompting Mr. Zhao to turn back and ask about the budget. He casually stated a figure of at least 30 million, while the director was still chuckling. However, Mr. Zhao's smile instantly froze when he realized the enormous figure he had just heard. Utterly stunned, he stammered a question to confirm it was 30 million, not 3 million. Gavin merely smiled calmly, firmly confirming the figure of 30 million. A design director rushed over, intending to take over, but Mr. Zhao immediately waved him off and declared that he would personally handle this project. Still skeptical, Mr. Zhao wondered why, with that amount of money, one could buy an entirely new villa, let alone renovate one. Without further explanation, Gavin simply handed him a roll of design blueprints to look at. As soon as he unrolled the blueprints, Mr. Zhao was utterly horrified, exclaiming and asking if Gavin was building a fortress or a bunker. Gavin smirked, stating he could pay extra if necessary, with the sole requirement being completion within half a month. Reading the details carefully, Mr. Zhao noticed absurd requirements like a system resistant to -90 degrees and 20 centimeters thick steel plates, concluding this was a war bunker for the apocalypse. The young man told him to just assume the apocalypse was truly coming, while also offering to pay 20 million up front today. Convinced by Gavin's decisiveness, Mr. Zhao agreed to mobilize all the company's resources to complete the safe house within half a month. On the way back, Yaniel Parker couldn't believe it, shouting that Gavin was crazy for spending $35 million to renovate a rented villa. Gavin merely explained that money was about to become worthless, but Yaniel still didn't understand where he got the $20 million deposit. He casually revealed that he had taken out a $10 million high-interest loan, causing Yaniel to frantically warn him about the consequences if the apocalypse prophecy didn't come true. Just then, Xenia Scott and her mother appeared, sarcastically asking Gavin how much he had spent on renovations, suggesting it was just a cheap attention-seeking stunt. Gavin Clark replied contemptuously, asserting that his business had nothing to do with Xenia. Xenia's mother immediately chimed in with mockery, boasting that her daughter had spent $1 million on home repairs and would teach him what real power was. Unable to hold back, Yaniel Parker loudly retorted that $1 million was nothing, because Gavin had spent $35 million. Xenia and her mother burst out laughing, calling it the most ridiculous boast they had ever heard. Gavin merely smiled defiantly, proposing a bet. If he truly spent that amount, Xenia's mother would have to call him Dad. Confident that she had investigated and knew Gavin only had $3 million from selling his house, Xenia warned him not to be foolish and end up broke. With a greedy expression, Xenia's mother immediately accepted the bet, certain the victory was hers. Just then, a female employee from the interior design company ran up, calling Gavin back because he had forgotten the contract. Xenia's mother immediately snatched the paper, eagerly declaring she would expose his lies in front of everyone. However, upon seeing the figure on the contract, her face instantly turned pale with horror. Xenia was still smug, asking her mother if it was just a pathetic small number. Sweating coldly, the mother stammered out the confirmation of the unbelievable figure, $35 million. Unable to accept the truth, she screamed hysterically, insisting that the contract must be fake. The female receptionist immediately stepped forward seriously to bear witness, confirming the contract was signed by Director Zhao himself and warning that they would face legal action if they continued to slander them. Gavin coldly stepped forward, demanding the woman fulfill her promise, infuriating her at being forced by a mere child to call him Dad. Without warning, Gavin swung his hand and delivered a thunderous slap across the arrogant woman's face. He and Yaniel casually turned and walked away, much to his friend's delight, leaving Xenia rushing to support her staggering mother behind them. Holding her mother, whose cheek bore a red slap mark, Xenia screamed in fury, swearing she would never forgive Gavin. The scene then shifted to a magnificent, splendid villa under the quiet night sky. At the villa, Yaniel Parker asked blankly why they had returned there. Gavin Clark smirked, asserting that he would make Yaniel believe in the impending apocalypse. As Gavin walked up the stairs, Yaniel could only think that his friend was either completely insane or everything he said was true. Outside, in the biting summer night, Yaniel shivered, having waited for 2 hours, and threatened to go home to sleep. Gavin looked up from his phone, his eyes sharp as he declared that the crucial moment was approaching. Immediately, a brilliant streak of light tore through the night sky, and Gavin confirmed that it had arrived. Still skeptical, Yaniel thought it was just a normal meteor. Gavin calmly explained that the true apocalypse was still half a month away, but the cold nights and frequent meteor showers were omens. Yaniel suddenly panicked, pointing at the sky and shouting that the meteor was hurtling straight towards them. Gavin recalled his past life, knowing that these meteors were opportunities to awaken powers, which had created many mighty ability users. He knew well that this meteor was the one that had fallen into this abandoned villa, and in his past life, it had been accidentally picked up by a thief. Seeing the meteor approaching, Yaniel grabbed his friend, screaming in fear and urging him to run. But Gavin charged forward with fiery eyes, declaring that this opportunity must be his. Yaniel desperately screamed, asking if Gavin was trying to die. Despite the warning, Gavin spread his arms wide, ready to embrace the energy from the cosmos. Yaniel froze, horrified, believing his friend had been crushed to dust by the meteor. But then, Gavin stood tall amidst a brilliant golden aura, telling himself that his physical attributes had been enhanced fivefold. He turned back with a confident smile, asking Yaniel if his friend believed him now. Yaniel Parker was utterly stunned, stammering, asking how Gavin could still be alive. Gavin, enveloped in a brilliant aura, declared that not only was he not dead, but he had also gained a special ability, becoming much stronger. Still skeptical, Yaniel pushed up his glasses, questioning that he saw no difference and wondering how Gavin had become stronger. Suddenly, a firm hand rested on Yaniel's shoulder, startling him. Without a word, Gavin lifted Yaniel's large body into the air with one hand, despite his friend's panicked screams. With a confident smile, Gavin asked if Yaniel believed him now. Yaniel was horrified to realize that someone weighing over 200 pounds like himself was easily lifted with just one hand. Yaniel's nightmare continued as Gavin held him suspended right on the edge of the rooftop. Down we go, Gavin commanded with determined eyes, preparing for his next crazy act. He decisively jumped off the building, dragging Yaniel, who was screaming in despair, thinking they were both about to die. A resounding thud echoed as they both landed safely, Gavin having absorbed the full impact. Yaniel's eyes flew open, unable to believe that he was completely unharmed. "Do you believe me now?" Gavin asked again. And this time Yaniel stammered, admitting he fully believed after witnessing the 10-meter jump without a scratch. In a luxurious villa, Xenia's mother approached her daughter, who was standing thoughtfully by the window, and asked what she was looking at. Xenia irritably replied that she saw a meteor fall near Gavin's rented house, prompting her mother to venomously curse that it should have hit him on the head. Xenia sneered, reassuring her mother that Zach Young was about to return and would certainly not let Gavin off easy. Just then, the doorbell rang, interrupting the mother and daughter's conversation. Xenia's mother rushed to greet young Master Young, who, upon arriving, immediately asked where Xenia was. Xenia immediately turned around, calling Zach's name with a seductive expression. Zach Young approached and embraced Xenia, patting her backside and demanding to take a bath immediately, having restrained himself for days. Xenia's mother awkwardly reminded Zach Young of her presence, but he merely grumbled, telling her to go boil water. Xenia quickly intervened, informing Zach of important news. Gavin had also moved into this neighborhood. Hearing this, Zach flew into a rage, roaring that he hadn't even gone looking for Gavin, yet Gavin dared to show his face first. Xenia's mother immediately added fuel to the fire, saying that Gavin deliberately rented a villa here to get close to her daughter and incited Zach to drive him away. Zach resolutely pulled out his phone, declaring he would call someone to make Gavin regret angering him for the rest of his life. With a murderous expression, he called a man named Biao and identified himself. The call was transferred to a bustling boxing club. In the ring, Biao, a red-haired boxer, was allowed to pause the match to take a call from young Master Young. Zach smirked, offering 200,000 to Biao to deal with someone for him. Biao confidently accepted, promising to complete the task and report back to Zach within 2 hours. Hanging up, Biao turned to his opponent, declaring he had business to attend to and wanted to end the match immediately. Biao's opponent, who called himself the Boxing King, felt disrespected and roared that a rookie like Biao was seeking death. Without another word, Biao delivered a devastating punch straight to his opponent's jaw. The stunned crowd couldn't believe a rookie could knock out the underground boxing champion with just one blow and cheered for a new king's arrival. Meanwhile, at the new villa, Gavin looked out into the night, silently contemplating the initial phase of the coming Ice Age apocalypse. Sitting with him, Yaniel Parker lamented humanity's cruel fate, and Gavin then asked if his friend had decided his future. Without hesitation, Yaniel sprang to his feet, asserting that he would follow everything Gavin said and do whatever he asked. Gavin calmly ordered Yaniel to first go home and sell off his father's assets. Yaniel confusedly explained that while his father had assets, convincing him to believe in the apocalypse would only make him think he had gone mad. Gavin Clark seriously explained that in just half a month, money would become worthless. Only supplies would be worth owning. Hearing this, Yaniel Parker made up his mind, declaring that even if his father beat him to death, he would follow his friend's words and immediately returned home. Suddenly, Gavin's eyes sharpened as he sensed something. He quickly signaled the bewildered Yaniel to be silent immediately. Gavin looked outside, announcing that someone was surrounding the entire villa. Outside, a group of thugs stood ready, their leader Biao ordering his subordinates to break down the door and storm in. A burly man carrying a sledgehammer eagerly accepted the order, shouting that he would do it. With a sinister smile, he swung the massive hammer towards the wooden door. However, just as the door shattered, a powerful recoil force sent both him and his hammer flying backward. At the doorway, Gavin stood calmly, coldly asking the identities of the uninvited guests, while Yaniel hid fearfully behind him. Biao was surprised to see that his target recognized them, and he asked if Gavin was a professional fighter. Gavin smirked, recognizing the leader as Duan Hu Biao from his past life's memories. Biao was stunned, unable to understand why a student would know his name. In Gavin's mind, memories of Duan Hu Biao resurfaced, a man who was lucky enough to gain power after the apocalypse and still retained some conscience. Biao pointed directly at Gavin's face, arrogantly declaring that he was sent by Zach Young to cripple him and leave him bedridden for half a year. In response to the threat, Gavin merely crossed his arms, sneered, and ordered them to leave. Enraged by the disrespect, Biao roared and lunged forward, unleashing a powerful punch. Gavin simply closed his eyes. In his perception, the punch was ridiculously slow. In just an instant, he effortlessly dodged the attack, leaving Biao utterly astonished by his opponent's extraordinary reflexes. Immediately after dodging, Gavin delivered a decisive elbow strike to Biao's chest, sending him flying. Biao's subordinates were stunned, unable to believe that their boss, the underground boxing champion, was defeated so easily. Biao knelt, clutching his chest and gasping for breath, realizing his opponent was far from ordinary, while Gavin coldly asked if he surrendered. But with the pride of a fighter, Duan Hubiao gritted his teeth and roared that the one who could make him submit had not yet been born. In response to that stubbornness, Gavin delivered a devastating kick, knocking Biao down a second time. As Biao lay sprawled on the ground, Gavin casually asked again. Though his body was defeated, Biao's will remained unyielding. He secretly thought he would never surrender. Gavin smiled, revealing that Biao's stubbornness was exactly what he wanted, and offered a proposition. Work for him in exchange for a way to save his sister. Biao was stunned. He couldn't understand why his biggest secret was known to this stranger. Gavin recounted in detail Biao's sister's incurable illness and the life or death fights he participated in just to earn money for her treatment. His pride shattered. Biao looked up with desperate eyes, asking if Gavin could truly save his sister. Gavin confidently asserted that he was the only one in this world who knew how, betting on Biao's trust. With no other choice, Biao accepted his submission, declaring that he would trust and do whatever Gavin asked. Gavin ordered Biao to find Zach Young, beat him until he was bedridden for half a month, and extract as much money as possible. Biao's eyes flashed with determination, and he silently accepted the mission. Immediately, Biao gathered his men and loudly ordered everyone to follow him. Faced with his subordinates' skepticism, Biao firmly stated that he had to seize any glimmer of hope to save his sister. Meanwhile, in a luxurious villa, Zach Young smugly thought that Gavin must be in the hospital by now. He embraced Xenia Scott, reveling in his victory, completely unaware that the nightmare he himself had created was on its way. While basking in the euphoria of victory, Zach Young was suddenly startled by violent knocking at the door. Xenia's mother stepped out angrily, loudly scolding whoever dared to disturb young Master Young's enjoyment. But when the door opened, she froze in horror at the sight of the fighter Biao and his stubborn thugs. Without a word of explanation, Biao roughly pushed the woman's arm aside and loudly demanded that she get out of the way. Still trying to save face, Xenia's mother loudly berated Biao for daring to barge in so disrespectfully. Her words were met with a thunderous slap, and Biao coldly ordered her to leave. Witnessing the scene, Zach Young still naively asked Biao if the job he had assigned was done. The arrogant young master held out a 200,000 reward, as casually as if bestowing a favor. However, instead of taking the money, Biao unexpectedly delivered a thunderous punch to Zach's back. Both Zach and Xenia were terrified. The young master screamed in panic, unable to understand why he was being beaten. Ignoring the questions, Biao coldly pointed at Zach and ordered his subordinates to seize him. Immediately, the thugs rushed forward, unleashing a merciless barrage of blows upon Zach. Despite being thoroughly beaten, Zach still struggled to his feet, using the wealth and influence of the vast Dragon Corporation to threaten them. Hearing this, Biao signaled his subordinates to stop, creating a tense silence. Thinking his threat had worked, Zach knelt on the floor and mocked Biao for making a big mistake. But Biao merely raised his head, boldly declaring Boss Clark's order, "Hang him up and beat him." Zach froze, his face paling as he was lifted, stammering curses at Biao, calling him insane. Held tightly by two thugs, he frantically screamed, asking for Boss Clark's identity, vaguely realizing it was Gavin. Hung upside down from the ceiling, Zach, in despair, confessed his pathetic financial limits. Biao stood with his arms crossed, coldly ordering the hanging Zach Young to transfer 10 million immediately. Immediately after, a successful transfer notification appeared on the phone screen. Meanwhile, Yaniel Parker frantically informed Gavin Clark about tomorrow's practical training, but he indifferently refused. However, Gavin immediately changed his attitude when he heard Yaniel say that the location was near North New City. He smiled, deciding to participate because it was exactly where he had planned to scout, and just then, his phone rang. On the other end of the line, Biao respectfully reported that Zach Young had transferred 10 million, and Gavin confirmed receipt of the money. Afterward, Gavin walked past a lottery ticket booth. He suddenly remembered the lottery ticket in his pocket and thought that if he won, he could buy a lot of supplies to prepare for the future. However, the result was a bitter disappointment. Gavin was stunned, unable to understand why he had lost despite remembering the exact numbers from his past life. He quickly dismissed the butterfly effect hypothesis, suspecting that some force had already moved a step ahead of him. With unwavering determination, Gavin turned and walked away, telling himself he had to find another way to earn a large sum of money. At the assembly point for the training session, while other students were buzzing with chatter, Gavin stood silently in the crowd. Suddenly, Jolene Little and Sharon Zeller blocked his path, Jolene angrily questioning why he dared to show his face there. Gavin merely smirked, casually asking why he wouldn't dare. Jolene then loudly accused Gavin of reneging on a debt, complaining that they both had to work for a whole month to pay off his $20,000 debt. In response to the accusation, Gavin coldly retorted that it had nothing to do with him. Jolene immediately changed her demeanor, closing in and using sweet words to coax Gavin into paying the debt, promising to do anything he wanted. Sharon chimed in, whispering suggestively that if he gave them $20,000, they wouldn't return to the dorm tonight. Gavin smiled slyly, turning the tables and demanding that the two girls lend him $40,000 first. Left behind, Sharon Zeller angrily shouted a threat at Gavin Clark's receding back. Immediately after, Yaniel Parker called out to him, drawing Gavin's attention to his friend's strangely swollen eyes. Yaniel sadly explained that he had cried, trying to convince his father about the apocalypse, but had completely failed. Gavin smiled mischievously, curiously asking about the outcome of that performance. Yaniel resentfully recounted that his father not only didn't believe him, but also angrily beat him with an iron rod, making him cry for real from the pain. Gavin patted his shoulder comfortingly, advising his friend not to be discouraged because accepting such a horrifying truth takes time. Just then, Instructor Chi Chung-dong loudly gathered all the students onto the bus for departure. On the bus ride to the training location, Gavin and Yaniel sat with their other classmates. Yaniel started complaining about being thirsty again, but Gavin merely ignored his friend's grumbling. Suddenly, a female student named Chi Kui timidly offered Gavin a bottle of water. Without hesitation, Gavin immediately passed the bottle of water to the parched Yaniel. Chi Kui took the opportunity to strike up a conversation, gently comforting Gavin about his recent breakup with Xenia. Gavin calmly replied that he wasn't sad at all. On the contrary, he felt lucky to have seen through her true colors. Seeing this, Chi Kui offered to lend Gavin her savings, but he politely declined, knowing her family's financial situation wasn't well off. Yaniel then leaned in and whispered, teasing Gavin about Chi Kui's obvious feelings, but Gavin gruffly told him to shut up. Before long, the bus stopped in front of a modern building, the destination of their trip. Instructor Chi Chung-dong asked the students to get off the bus in order to prepare to receive their internship assignments. While waiting, the students buzzed with discussions about the 3 internship levels in the building, where the first floor was the worst and the third floor was the most desirable. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Instructor Chi Chung-dong began reading the assignment list, calling out Sharon and Jolene for prestigious positions on the 3rd floor. Sharon Zeller gloated to Jolene Little that thanks to Hunter, their spots on the 3rd floor were guaranteed. Meanwhile, Chi Kui stood silently with a determined gaze, catching the attention of Sharon and Jolene. With a malicious smile, Sharon plotted that Chi Kui, with her humble background and lack of connections, would be the perfect target for their scheme. Instructor Chi Chung-dong continued reading the list, calling out the names of students assigned to internships on the 2nd floor. Yaniel Parker angrily shouted, when he realized that their group's names weren't even on the 2nd floor list. Instructor Chi Chung-dong coldly announced that the remaining 3, Gavin, Yaniel, and Chi Kui, would have to intern on the 1st floor. Chi Kui bowed her head sadly, worried that they wouldn't learn anything in the lowest-ranked position. Another group of students began to mock and ridicule the trio for being stuck on the 1st floor, especially wondering why Yaniel was there too. Gavin Clark stepped forward with a challenging smile, questioning Instructor Chi Chung-dong about the basis of this unfair decision. The instructor replied condescendingly that this was a joint decision by the school and the company, demanding that Gavin not complain. Gavin smirked, scoffing at the talk of fairness and directly calling the instructor a lying bastard. Shocked by the insolent attitude, Chi Chung-dong roared, threatening to expel Gavin immediately. He tried to justify himself, pointing and saying that if even the young master Yaniel was assigned to the 1st floor, along with a poor kid like Gavin, what was unfair about it? Unable to bear it any longer, Yaniel exploded, exposing Chi Chung-dong's true colors by shouting that he had demanded a bribe from his father. The instructor's face turned pale, stammering Yaniel's name in a fit of rage at having his secret exposed. Yaniel triumphantly raised his phone, declaring that he had a recording as evidence, which silenced Chi Chung-dong. Just then, another student named Wang Da stepped forward, interjecting and criticizing Gavin's group for going too far. Wang Da pointed directly at them, loudly lecturing them about upsetting the advisor and disrespecting teachers. Sharon Zeller immediately chimed in, defending the instructor and scolding Gavin's group as ungrateful, picky, and undeserving of an internship. In response to the criticism, Gavin Clark coldly told Wang Da to get lost. Wang Da was furious, thinking Gavin had gone crazy after being dumped by Xenia, and dared to be insolent to him. Without a word of warning, Gavin struck Wang Da hard on the back of the neck, stunning him. His rage flaring, Wang Da roared and lunged, throwing a punch at Gavin. However, Gavin easily caught his opponent's punch with just one hand. Wang Da was utterly terrified, Unable to believe why Gavin possessed such terrifying strength, Gavin coldly threw 2 consecutive punches, reminding Wang Da that he had already told him to get lost. Panicked, Wang Da hastily called for the instructor's help, shouting that Gavin had gone mad. Gavin delivered a lightning-fast kick, decisively knocking Wang Da to the ground. Instructor Qi Changdong immediately intervened, using his authority as a teacher to order Gavin to stop and apologize. In response, Gavin turned and delivered a thunderous slap to the instructor, questioning his authority. Witnessing the scene, Yaniel Parker cheered with delight, applauding his friend's actions. The surrounding students were stunned, unable to believe Gavin dared to lay hands on even a teacher. Clutching his swollen cheek, Qi Changdong threatened to expel Gavin from the internship program. Gavin didn't care in the slightest, throwing another punch and warning that Head beat him to death if he kept babbling. Leaving Wang Da and Qi Changdong unconscious on the ground, Gavin called Yaniel to leave with him. Yaniel turned anxiously to ask Gavin about his plans for Qi Kui. Gavin smiled, turned back, and invited the shy Qi Kui to come with him. Meanwhile, Sharon Zeller and Jolene Little approached Qi Changdong, pretending to offer to take care of Qi Kui, but the teacher merely brushed them off, declaring he would go find the principal to expel Gavin. Sharon and Jolene approached Qi Kui, advising her to go with them, and warning that associating with Gavin would ruin her future. Bidding farewell to Qi Kui, Gavin instructed her to call him if anything happened. Together with Yaniel, Gavin confidently declared it was time to take care of important business. Their destination was the province's largest logistics park, which Yaniel explained contained an enormous amount of goods. Yaniel asked in astonishment if Gavin intended to target the supplies there, receiving a self-satisfied affirmative answer. To Yaniel's dismay about how they could break in and steal the goods, Gavin merely smiled mysteriously. Gavin quickly spotted a potential entrance upon seeing a recruitment sign and a long line of women queuing. He then approached and politely asked the men at the recruitment desk if they were hiring. However, one of the recruiters flatly refused, stating that they only hired women. Yaniel was confused about what to do next, but Gavin remained calm and thoughtful. Gavin came up with a new plan, telling Yaniel to go back, find, and bring Qi Kui here. Meanwhile, in a busy office, Qi Kui had started the job that Sharon and Jolene had introduced her to. Jolene received an urgent call from a person named Hunter, urging that Mr. Jiang needed someone immediately, and that the person must be a virgin. With the objective clear, Sharon decided they would go confirm if Qi Kui met the conditions. Both approached Qi Kui's desk, pretending to be friendly, and asking about her work situation. Completely unsuspecting, Qi Kui happily thanked her 2 classmates for helping her learn many new things. Sharon and Jolene responded with fake kindness, while their eyes and smiles revealed their dark intentions. Putting an arm around Qi Kui intimately, Sharon probed with a direct question. "Have you ever had a boyfriend?" and received the innocent answer they expected. Jolene Little excitedly offered to introduce Qi Kui to a boyfriend. Qi Kui politely refused, asserting she only wanted to focus on work, but Sharon Zeller used the prospect of a rich boyfriend to persuade her. Despite Qi Kui's hesitation, her 2 fake friends still pressured her to come along, insisting it was just a simple meeting. The 3 entered a modern, brightly lit office building. Upon arrival, Qi Kui still tried to refuse, but Sharon and Jolene happily announced they had arrived and praised a man named Jiang profusely. Jolene formally introduced Qi Kui to Mr. Jiang, the man who had his back to them. Mr. Jiang turned around, revealing a lecherous smile as he appraised Qi Kui's innocent appearance, secretly praising the reliability of the broker named Hunter. Sharon cruelly revealed the harsh truth. Mr. Jiang was the boyfriend they intended to introduce, leaving Qi Kui stunned with horror. Completely satisfied, Mr. Jiang ordered Sharon and Jolene to collect their 30,000 yuan reward each. With a sinister smile, Sharon wished Mr. Jiang a good time, and then turned and left, leaving Qi Kui desperately clinging on in vain. The door slammed shut, trapping Qi Kui in the room with her predator. Mr. Jiang approached from behind, making a disgusting offer that she would receive more money if she served him well. Stepping back in fear, Qi Kui raised her phone, threatening to call the police if he didn't let her go. The man laughed contemptuously, scoffing that the security team here were all his people. Cornered, Qi Kui trembled as she begged for mercy, pleading that she only wanted to work in peace. Mr. Jiang angrily swung his arm, violently knocking the phone from her hand. He stepped closer, growling that once a woman entered his doors, none could leave unscathed. In her moment of despair, the phone discarded on the floor suddenly lit up, displaying an incoming call from Gavin. As he was walking with Yaniel, Gavin's phone suddenly rang. He was surprised to see that the caller was Qi Kui. Happily answering the phone, he asked what had happened, but on the other end, Mr. Jiang had stomped on the phone, cutting off all communication. The man approached with a disgusting smile, coaxing Chi Kuitsui to accept her fate. Cornered, Chi Kuitsui grabbed a nearby potted plant, preferring death over submission. The sudden disconnection of the call made Gavin's smile vanish, replaced by a bad premonition. Realizing Chi Kuitsui was in danger, he immediately turned and ran to her rescue. During the struggle, Chi Kuitsui used all her strength to throw the potted plant at Mr. Jiang. Attacked by surprise, he clutched his head, his eyes blazing with anger. Without hesitation, he swung his hand and delivered a powerful slap that sent Chi Kuitsui sprawling. Meanwhile, Gavin and Yaniel had arrived, but were stopped at the door by a security guard. Yaniel immediately yelled at the guard for daring to block a young master's path, leaving him stunned. Not wanting to waste time, Gavin coldly pushed the guard aside and entered. He quickly located Chi Kuitsui and ordered Yaniel to go straight to the 3rd floor. The guard hastily followed, pleading with young Master Jiang not to disturb his father who was busy with important matters. Gavin turned back, his eyes sharp as knives, and made a statement that stunned the guard. "I am Mr. Jiang's father." He was utterly bewildered by such an absurd claim from a young man. Gavin's eyes flashed with a cold gaze, allowing no one to stand in his way. Finally realizing something was amiss, the guard quickly drew his baton and yelled for backup. As the elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, a fateful confrontation was about to begin. Just as they stepped out, Sharon Zeller and Jolene Little were stopped by Gavin, right as they were gleefully discussing Mr. Jiang having fun with Chi Kuitsui. Both froze when they recognized the person in front of them, Jolene stammering to ask why Gavin was there. Ignoring their astonishment, Gavin growled a single question, cold and sharp. "Where is Chi Kuitsui?" Sharon quickly regained her haughty demeanor, chin raised, asking why an outsider like him dared to interfere. Gavin's patience reached its limit. He repeated the question once more, his eyes burning as if to incinerate his opponents. Sharon remained stubborn, pointing a finger at Gavin's face and loudly warning him not to cause trouble. Without another word, a thunderous slap from Gavin left Sharon stunned. Witnessing her friend fall sprawling, Jolene screamed in horror, unable to believe Gavin would act so cruelly. Immediately, Jolene suffered the same fate with a slap that sent her glasses flying. Standing tall before the 2 villains lying on the floor, Gavin repeated the question for the 3rd time, his voice devoid of emotion. Completely subdued, Sharon tremblingly pointed towards a room, confessing that Chi Kuitsui was inside with Mr. Jiang. Nevertheless, Sharon still tried to salvage the situation by threatening Gavin with Mr. Jiang's influence. Ignoring the meaningless warning, Gavin delivered a thunderous kick that shattered the wooden door. Inside, the sight of Chi Kuitsui being restrained by Mr. Jiang met his eyes. She desperately cried for help, while the man roared at him to leave. Gavin and Yaniel burst in, Gavin's killing intent surging as he ordered the scoundrel to release her. Confident in his status, Mr. Jiang pointed a finger at Gavin's face, arrogantly asking if he knew who he was confronting. Quick as lightning, Gavin seized the man's pointing finger, making Mr. Jiang's smug smile freeze. A horrifying crack echoed as Gavin broke the man's finger without hesitation, a scream of agony tearing through the air. Clutching his mangled hand, Mr. Jiang shrieked, frantically calling for security. Gavin delivered a devastating kick to Mr. Jiang's face, growling that a beast like him deserved to die. Immediately after, he quickly turned to support the panicked Chi Kuitsui, anxiously asking about her condition. The door burst open, and a squad of security guards stormed in. Their leader, holding a baton, yelled, demanding to know who dared to cause trouble. Seeing the reinforcements, Mr. Jiang immediately pointed at Gavin and Yaniel, frantically ordering the guards to beat them to death. From afar, Sharon Zeller gloated that Gavin deserved to be beaten to death, while Jolene Little secretly thought this fool didn't know how powerful the person he had provoked was. However, a security guard was unexpectedly sent flying backward, crashing directly into the 2 gloating girls. Sharon was utterly horrified to see the entire security squad defeated, lying motionless in the hallway. Gavin strode purposefully towards Mr. Jiang, who was slumped on the floor, making the man stammer in fear, asking what else he wanted. With eyes as cold as ice, Gavin declared that he would make sure the man could never think of women again. With that, he delivered a merciless kick to Mr. Jiang's groin, accompanied by a horrifying sound of breaking bones. Gavin coldly turned his back and walked away, ignoring the man's desperate screams of extreme pain behind him. His bloodshot eyes, filled with killing intent, now fixed directly on the stunned Sharon and Jolene. Both trembled with fear, quickly making excuses that they were classmates and that he couldn't lay a hand on women. Hoping to be spared, Gavin grabbed Jolene's hair, growling a question about their status as classmates after what they had done to Chi Kuitsui. He swung his hand and slapped Sharon hard across the face, warning that if they no longer had any use, he would have crippled them both long ago. With that, Gavin, Yaniel, and Chi Kuitsui left, abandoning the 3 villains kneeling on the floor in humiliation. Sharon quickly crawled to Mr. Jiang, frantically asking about him and offering to call the police immediately. However, he furiously slapped her across the face, dismissing the idea of calling the police and yelling to be taken to the hospital. In a fit of rage, Jiang Baichuan called a place named Ziwei Biotech, demanding they help him eliminate a kid. On the tree-lined road, Chi Kui walked beside Gavin and Yaniel, softly thanking the person who had saved her. Gavin brushed off Chi Kui's thanks, saying they were classmates, and asking about her future plans. Chi Kui sadly revealed that having lost her internship, her job prospects were now very bleak. Seeing his friend's despair, Gavin made a surprising offer, saying he would find her a job. Chi Kui's face lit up with hope as she joyfully agreed immediately. Immediately after, Gavin led both of them to an outdoor recruitment booth at a logistics park. Chi Kui asked in surprise if Gavin really wanted her to work there, and he firmly confirmed it. She hesitantly pointed out that the advertised position was warehouse manager, while her major was finance. Gavin smiled encouragingly, asserting that all work has value, and she could shine anywhere. The recruiter grew impatient, tapped his watch, and urged them to make a quick decision. Gavin gently pushed Chi Kui forward, urging her to register quickly, and she obediently complied. After she completed the procedures, Gavin and Yaniel waved goodbye, promising to visit her in a few days. On the way back, Yaniel remarked that only a naive girl like Chi Kui would accept a security guard job despite being an excellent finance student. Gavin just smiled meaningfully, replying that it was precisely that naivety which had secured her this opportunity. Once everything was settled, Gavin told Yaniel it was time for them to head back. However, both of their steps suddenly halted as a cold gun barrel pressed against the back of Gavin's neck, along with the command, "Don't move." Gavin and Yaniel realized in horror that they were surrounded by a group of men in black suits, and he recognized them as Mr. Lowe's subordinates. One of the subordinates declared that the 3 days were up. Now their bodies belonged to Mr. Lowe, and they had come to take them for organ harvesting. Yaniel whispered in panic, not understanding why Gavin was submitting when he could easily take down these 4 men. Contrary to his friend's anxiety, Gavin smirked, calmly saying to just follow them because the real show was yet to come. The car stopped in front of a secluded building, and a voice ordered everyone to get out. Yaniel Parker realized in dismay that they had been taken to an abandoned factory in the suburbs. A gray-haired bodyguard pointed a gun at Gavin Clark, imperiously ordering him to hurry up. Gavin's eyes flashed with a deadly glint, signaling his impending action. Quick as lightning, he spun around and disarmed the bodyguard, who was taken by surprise. A gunshot rang out, the bullet striking the bodyguard squarely in the forehead, ending his life. Gavin stood coldly over the enemy's corpse, the gun barrel still smoking. 3 other bodyguards immediately appeared, pointing their guns and roaring that he was seeking death. Without hesitation, Gavin fired a rapid succession of shots, taking down all 3 in an instant. Witnessing the scene, Yaniel exclaimed in astonishment, unable to believe his friend's unerring marksmanship. Gavin calmly tossed a gun to Yaniel, signaling him to join the fight. He recalled his previous life, when without supernatural abilities, he could only frantically train to become a sharpshooter to increase his chances of survival. Yaniel awkwardly held the gun, stammering that he didn't know how to use it. Gavin then asked if he played shooting games, and Yaniel confidently affirmed that he was a master. Hearing that, Gavin smiled and told him to just treat it like a real game. Both advanced further, discovering a container truck parked in the factory's backyard. Yaniel was stunned to recognize the logo on the truck as Ziwei Biotech, one of the world's top 3 biotechnology corporations. Gavin explained that in his previous life, Ziwei Biotech was hailed as saviors. But now he knew their true nature was far from simple. Suddenly, 2 guards in camouflage appeared from a doorway, loudly demanding to know who was there. 2 suppressed gunshots rang out. Gavin and Yaniel fired simultaneously, cleanly taking down both guards. Gavin approached, picked up an employee ID card from one of the guards, and confirmed they were definitely Ziwei Biotech personnel. A woman from Ziwei Biotech expressed satisfaction with Lowe, praising the fresh goods he provided. Lowe smiled back, considering this cooperation an honor, and promising to soon deliver 2 more live goods to complete the set of 6. Suddenly, Lowe's gaze landed on the 2 teenagers approaching, who were precisely the 2 targets he had sent men to capture. With a smug look, Lowe introduced to Miss Pei that these were the last 2 goods, still alive, healthy, and full of energy. Miss Pei frowned, noticing something unusual as she saw both of them armed with guns, and questioned Lowe. Lowe's face stiffened in shock as Gavin, without a word of warning, pointed his gun directly at him. A gunshot rang out. Gavin pulled the trigger with cold, decisive eyes. The bullet struck Lowe directly in the knee, causing him to collapse in pain and scream orders for his subordinates to seize them. Gavin calmly stood amidst the gunfire, his precise shots taking down 4 of Lowe's bodyguards in an instant. Miss Pei exclaimed in horror at Gavin's terrifying marksmanship, while Lo continued to scream in pain, urging everyone to charge. Gavin signaled Yaniel to stay put, then he alone charged forward to confront the crowd, continuing to fire and take down more enemies. Lo roared furiously, declaring that no one had ever dared to cause trouble on his turf, and ordering his subordinates to crush the two intruders. With fluid movements, Gavin moved while shooting down 3 more bodyguards with 2 guns in his hands. The remaining bodyguards panicked when they saw Gavin appear on top of a container with incredible speed. They hastily opened fire to stop him. 2 thuds echoed as the bodies of 2 recently downed bodyguards fell from above, right in front of Miss Pei, making her flinch back. Amidst the battlefield littered with corpses, Gavin and Yaniel slowly approached, making Miss Pei tremble as she asked what they wanted. Gavin pointed his gun, his eyes sharp and cold, and retorted, "That's what I should be asking you. What do you want?" Lo, despite being injured, still tried to act arrogant, growling and asking where a brat like Gavin got the right to know his business. Without hesitation, Gavin fired again, another bullet striking Lo in the shoulder, extinguishing the old man's arrogance. Smoke still lingered on the barrel as Gavin looked directly at Lo, with an impassive and challenging expression. "Say that again. I'm listening." Even on his knees with a shoulder wound, Lo growled threats at Gavin, declaring that he was not someone to be easily intimidated. Gavin coldly turned to a stunned Yaniel Parker and issued a cruel command, "Kill him." His gaze didn't waver as he repeated the demand, forcing his best friend to confront the brutal reality. Enraged, Lo pulled out a gun, roaring that anyone who dared to oppose him would go to hell. Following the command, Yaniel closed his eyes and pulled the trigger in a panic, a deafening gunshot echoing. Lo froze, his eyes wide with disbelief as a bullet hole appeared right in the middle of his forehead. Standing over Lo's corpse, Yaniel trembled as he looked at the gun in his hand, horrified to realize he had just taken a life. Gavin didn't even glance at the corpse, turning to the blonde woman and saying that compared to her, Pei, Lo was just useless. To Pei's astonishment, he smirked, arrogantly teasing that she could call him dad. Anger flared on Pei's face at the stranger's insolence, but a loud bang extinguished her rage, replaced by the pain of a bullet lodging in her leg. Clutching her wound, Pei tried to threaten Gavin by invoking her title as a director at Ziwei Biotech. Her warning was met with another gunshot, the bullet piercing her other leg. Gavin looked down at the woman writhing on the ground, stating that he had no interest in meaningless threats. Completely broken, Pei frantically begged for her life and confessed everything. Lo had been supplying live human organs to Ziwei Biotech for experiments. Gavin's expression hardened as he questioned what kind of experiments they were conducting. Pei stammered that it was research on human evolution and biological weapons, promising to lead the way if her life was spared. Without needing her guidance, a memory of the war god Mantis from his previous life flashed, and Gavin bitterly realized that Ziwei Biotech had started these inhumane experiments a long time ago. Pei was stunned, unable to believe how he knew about their top-secret project. At the same time, Yaniel screamed in horror as he opened a nearby crate, discovering it was filled with human organs. Wounded and desperate, Pei tried to entice Gavin with promises of power and wealth if he joined Ziwei Biotech. However, her offer was met only by the cold barrel of a gun, and Gavin's decisive answer, "Not interested." Facing death, Pei frantically pleaded, insisting that she still had value. Gavin smirked, curiously asking how else she could be useful. With the gun barrel pressed to her mouth, Pei tremblingly made her final offer, boasting about her skills. Her eyes widened in horror, recognizing the unyielding cruelty in Gavin's gaze. A gunshot rang out, and Gavin ended Pei's life without hesitation. He coldly looked down at the corpse, scoffing that she couldn't even block a single bullet. After searching, Gavin found what he needed, the VIP keycard to infiltrate Ziwei Biotech's main headquarters. 3 days later, in a luxurious office, Jiang Baichuan roared into the phone upon hearing that someone dared to cause trouble at Ziwei Biotech. He angrily demanded why he, an investor, was kept in the dark about such important information. Just then, a muscular man with curly hair walked in, announcing his arrival. With a sinister smile, Jiang Baichuan ordered the newcomer, Hunter, to deal with the brat Gavin. Hunter confidently replied, revealing that he already had a grudge against Gavin and would act soon. Meanwhile, Gavin's new villa, a reinforced fortress even sturdier than a tank, was nearing completion. Director Zhao reported to Gavin that the interior renovation would be completed within another week. As they spoke, a woman introducing herself as Auntie Liu from the Friendly Residence Committee came to greet the new neighbor. She enthusiastically invited Gavin to join the neighborhood chat group for easier communication. After Gavin agreed, Auntie Liu immediately asked for the leftover cardboard boxes from the renovation. Gavin smiled politely, confirming he didn't need them but subtly declined her offer to enter his house. Auntie Lou insisted on taking the cardboard boxes, saying she would go get a cart, despite Gavin's attempts to explain that the construction was urgent. She angrily called Gavin stingy and tried to barge in, forcing him to hold her back and offer to bring the boxes to her in a week. Auntie Lou brushed off the offer, yelling that she wanted them immediately, fearing others would sell them. Losing all patience, Gavin growled with a sharp gaze, ordering her to get lost. Shocked by Gavin's attitude, Auntie Lou pointed at his face and loudly questioned why he dared to curse at her. Gavin coldly gave a final warning, threatening to show no mercy if she didn't leave. As she resentfully walked away, Auntie Lou looked back and uttered threats, calling Gavin disrespectful and saying he would pay for it. The scene shifted to a luxurious room where Zach Young placed a suitcase containing $500,000 on the table and handed it to a one-eyed man named One-Eyed Dragon. One-Eyed Dragon respectfully declined, stating that serving young Master Young was the duty of a vast Dragon Group employee. With a sinister expression, Zach Young ordered them to make Gavin disappear from this world cleanly, leaving no trace. One-Eyed Dragon smirked confidently, proclaiming himself a professional assassin, and assuring that he would act tonight to make Gavin vanish as if he had never existed. Zach Young stood there, watching the backs of the assassins as they left to carry out their mission. He flashed a mad smile, smug that Gavin had no idea of the terrifying power Zach Young wielded. As night fell, one of the assassins spoke up as they approached a high-end hotel. The spiky-haired subordinate reported to One-Eyed Dragon that Gavin was in the presidential suite of this hotel. One-Eyed Dragon ordered the group to follow closely, be alert to every movement, and not let the target escape. Meanwhile, Gavin was leisurely reclining on the sofa, satisfied that everything since his reincarnation had gone according to plan. He smiled confidently, silently thinking about the most crucial step that would take place in 3 days, a step that would determine the success or failure of the entire plan. Suddenly, his ear twitched, and his eyes sharpened as he heard strange noises from outside. Outside the door, One-Eyed Dragon silently drew his gun, each step of the assassin echoing with deadly intent. Gavin Clark smirked, guessing this person was sent by Zach Young, and decided to play a little game. Listening through the door, he not only learned their plan, but was also surprised to realize that 2 groups of assassins were approaching simultaneously. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Hunter led his subordinates, warning them not to be careless as this target was not simple. A gray-haired subordinate sneered, showing off his carefully prepared weapon, and assured Hunter that they would succeed this time. With a cold expression, Hunter gave a decisive order. Beat the target to death, then cut off an ear and send it to Mr. Jiang. Inside the room, Gavin gave a mischievous smile, then flipped the switch, and the entire room immediately plunged into pitch-black darkness. One-Eyed Dragon's group saw the lights suddenly go out, assumed the target was fast asleep, and prepared to break in. At the same time, Hunter also roared, ordering his men to attack simultaneously from another direction. 2 groups of assassins from different directions stormed into the pitch-black room, completely unaware of each other's presence. One-Eyed Dragon suddenly raised his hand to signal a halt. He sensed someone ahead in the darkness. He pointed his gun at Hunter's silhouette and gave an order, mistakenly thinking it was the student he was hunting. On the opposite side, Hunter made a similar mistake. He sneered and challenged back the person he thought was the target. Enraged by the opponent's arrogant attitude, One-Eyed Dragon growled a threat, completely unaware he was speaking to another boss. Hunter also furiously yelled, thinking the other person had the wrong script to dare say such words to him. One-Eyed Dragon lost all patience, declaring that the loudmouth in front of him today would surely die. Hunter also thought this kid was too arrogant, daring to act like a hunter, and then he yelled an order to eliminate him. Almost immediately, One-Eyed Dragon also simultaneously ordered his men to kill the enemy. A chaotic gunfight erupted in the darkness, bullets flying everywhere as the 2 groups of assassins furiously shot at each other. One-Eyed Dragon's subordinate screamed in panic, reporting that the target had reinforcements, and urged his comrades to get their weapons out. Hunter's men also shrieked in terror that the enemy had many supporters, then frantically ordered to continue firing. Amidst the echoing gunshots, Gavin Clark smiled smugly, thinking to himself, "Let those fools play their own game." After the battle, One-Eyed Dragon panted, leaning against the door, and triumphantly declared that he had taken down all enemies. But when the lights came on, Hunter lay sprawled on the floor, astonished to see One-Eyed Dragon standing amidst the corpses, and questioned what he was doing there. One-Eyed Dragon was also stunned to recognize Hunter Walsh from West City, and both roared that they had come here to kill Gavin. In a fit of rage, One-Eyed Dragon yelled, realizing both groups had been tricked, and Gavin had probably long since fled. 3 days later, Yaniel Parker rushed to find Gavin Clark and handed him something. He angrily reported that Gavin had been expelled by his instructor, Chi Chang-dong, who used his connections, but Gavin calmly replied that a diploma was meaningless with the apocalypse approaching. Yaniel remained furious, saying he couldn't stand Chi Changdong's smug expression as he boasted in the class group chat. Gavin smirked cunningly, confidently asserting that he had a way to deal with that teacher. In the group chat, Chi Changdong gleefully announced Gavin's expulsion, and Wang Da immediately chimed in. While the teacher continued to provoke him, Gavin narrowed his eyes as he read the mocking and challenging messages on his phone screen. In response, he simply sent a middle finger emoji to Chi Changdong with a short message, "Idiot." Offended, Chi Changdong flew into a rage and threatened that Gavin would regret his actions. Immediately, Gavin launched a fatal counterattack, sending a long message accusing Chi Changdong of having an illicit affair with the principal's wife, specifying both the location and time of their rendezvous. Yaniel Parker's jaw dropped in astonishment at the shocking information, and he quickly asked Gavin how he knew about this. Gavin secretly recalled that in his previous life, when the apocalypse struck and morality collapsed, Chi Changdong had personally confessed all his secrets to him. In the group chat, Chi Changdong was in extreme panic, demanding the administrator disband the group immediately and threatening anyone who dared to spread the information. Seeing this, Yaniel chuckled with delight and declared he would post the entire chat log on the school forum to expose the teacher. With that settled, Gavin calmly invited Yaniel to take care of other important matters, leaving his friend bewildered. Gavin inquired about Yaniel's father still not believing his warnings, and his friend sadly admitted that his father was about to commit him to a mental hospital. Gavin reassured his friend, promising that after this important matter was handled, he would go with Yaniel to meet his father to clarify everything. As night fell, the two entered a quiet residential area. Upon arrival, Yaniel was skeptical, wondering what important event could happen in a place like this urban village. His friend observed the house in front of them and remarked that it didn't look like a wealthy family's home at all. Meanwhile, inside the house, a hand clenched an empty bottle, annoyed that the alcohol was gone again. A dilapidated scene unfolded with a drunken, muscular man named Feng Kui and a young person shivering in an iron cage. Feng Kui cast a malicious gaze towards the cage. Despite the circumstances, the captive looked up at him with hateful eyes, completely unafraid. Enraged by the defiance, Feng Kui violently threw the bottle at the bars, roaring a threat to gouge out the person's eyes. He spewed insults, cursing the captive as a burden, and complaining about the meager dowry that had been spent, then declared he would sell the house. With a wicked smile, he added that before selling the house, he would sell the person first to get money for a few drinks. He brutally dragged the person out of the cage by their hair. Feng Kui confessed to having beaten the victim's mother to death, and threatened that if they dared to resist, they would meet a similar fate. In despair and fury, the captive bit the man's hand hard. Infuriated, Feng Kui raised his hand, intending to end the person's life so they could reunite with their mother. A loud bang echoed as the main door suddenly flew inward, hitting Feng Kui directly in the face. Gavin and Yaniel stood tall at the doorway, their eyes as cold as ice. Caught off guard, Feng Kui was stunned and asked who the two strangers were, while Gavin replied with a loaded question. "What do you think?" Gavin's memories flooded back, recalling Feng Kui, a scoundrel who had gained spatial abilities and was once hailed as a national hero. But then, the heroic image crumbled, revealing the cruel truth as Feng Kui embezzled relief supplies, leaving millions to die of hunger and cold. Even so, Feng Kui didn't have a good end in his previous life. He died in the mouth of an ice demon, and all his accumulated supplies vanished with him. Back in reality, Gavin looked at the person Feng Kui was grabbing by the hair and realized the existence of a little girl he had never heard of in his previous life. Feng Kui arrogantly assumed they were human traffickers, then shamelessly named a price for the little girl he was tormenting. Unable to control his rage, Yaniel pointed directly at Feng Kui and yelled that he was a beast. He emphasized the insult, asserting that Feng Kui's behavior was worse than an animal's. Enraged, the thug claimed that a human trafficker like Yaniel had no right to judge him. Yaniel resolutely denied his baseless accusation. Losing all patience, Feng Kui grabbed a bottle of alcohol, threatening to smash the skull of the young man who dared to defy him. A deafening gunshot rang out, and Feng Kui shrieked in pain as the bullet lodged directly into his leg. Yaniel coldly held the smoking gun, while Gavin stood beside him, smiling in appreciation of his friend's ability. The thug collapsed to the floor, clutching his bleeding wound and growling, asking for the identities of the strangers. Pointing the gun directly at Feng Kui, Yaniel declared that he would never forgive a scoundrel like him. Unexpectedly, the captive little girl sprang up, using a shard of broken glass to stab Feng Kui hard in the head, to Yaniel's astonishment. Both Gavin and Yaniel were stunned by the little girl's fierce and hateful action. Feng Kui clutched his bloodied head, turning to look at his victim with a crazed gaze as he realized he had just been attacked. Without hesitation, the little girl continued to swing the bottle, delivering another devastating blow to the head of her tormentor. Feng Ke collapsed to the floor, only managing to utter a weak threat while the little girl stood there, her hand still clutching the weapon. The little girl's eyes gleamed with extreme hatred, raising the broken glass shard, ready to unleash her long-suppressed fury. The little girl furiously attacked her enemy, and when Yaniel tried to intervene, Gavin immediately held his friend back. Gavin silently watched, thinking to himself that this was the explosion of hatred, and if he stopped her now, the little girl's life would be completely ruined. The little girl's trembling hand gripped the blood-soaked neck of the broken bottle, the weapon she had just used to finish off her tormentor. After her frenzy, the little girl stood motionless, looking at the man lying still in a pool of blood on the floor. Yaniel exclaimed in horror that Feng Ke was dead, but Gavin coldly replied that someone like him deserved that fate. Gavin instructed Yaniel to take the little girl to wash off the blood and comfort her, while he prepared for a major event about to unfold. Alone on the rooftop, Gavin looked up at the night sky, where a magnificent meteor shower was beginning to pour down onto the earth. With fiery eyes, he realized this was the greatest opportunity before the apocalypse struck. Gavin spread his arms wide, receiving the pure energy from the meteor trails, and his body began to emit a brilliant golden light. His face glowed with extreme joy as he declared he had successfully absorbed the great power. Hovering in a vast dimensional space, Gavin was astonished to realize he had acquired immense spatial abilities, enough to store supplies for the end of days. Back on the rooftop, a strange sound made him turn his head, his eyes becoming vigilant. Looking down from above, Gavin was a little surprised to see a police car parked right below the building. Meanwhile, a handcuffed bald man was pointing out to the police, confessing that this was where Feng Ke had arranged to sell him a girl. The leading police officer immediately drew his gun, ordering the entire unit to prepare for a raid on the apartment. After being cleaned up, the little girl with black hair and blue eyes stood silently, her expression calm but still tinged with sadness. Yaniel happily remarked to Gavin that the little girl looked really cute after being taken care of. Gavin suddenly announced that the police were outside, causing Yaniel to immediately panic about the corpse and the guns still in the house. However, Gavin remained completely confident, declaring that if they had to flee before, the story was now entirely different. Before Yaniel's stunned eyes, Feng Ke's body disintegrated into countless particles of light and vanished without a trace. Just then, the door was burst open, and police forces stormed in, pointing their guns and shouting for everyone to freeze. The commanding police officer pointed his gun straight ahead, sternly asking, "Who is Feng Ke?" Facing the police, the handcuffed customer hastily confessed that Feng Ke was not here. The commanding police officer growled, questioning Gavin and Yaniel about their presence at the scene. Gavin, with an unusually calm expression, smiled and introduced himself as a distant cousin visiting the little girl. Meanwhile, Yaniel stammered that he was just a classmate who came along, sweat pouring down his face before the dark muzzle of the gun. Another police officer knelt down, using a gentle tone to ask the frightened little girl her name. The little girl looked up with clear eyes, softly answering that her name was Shishi. The police officer then turned to ask Shishi if she truly knew the young man who claimed to be her relative. Without hesitation, Shishi firmly confirmed that Gavin was her cousin, something her mother had once told her. Believing the statement, the police officer instructed the group to report immediately if they had any leads on Feng Ke, then withdrew. When the door closed, Yaniel finally breathed a sigh of relief, overjoyed at having escaped danger, and urged everyone to leave quickly. Suddenly, Shishi gently tugged Yaniel's shirt, drawing his attention to her presence. Yaniel suddenly realized, worriedly wondering what Shishi's future would hold now that her kidnapper was dead. Gavin calmly turned around, gently inviting Shishi to come with them. Shishi's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope, and she softly nodded in agreement. Yaniel also earnestly asked Gavin to take care of the little girl, and he agreed on the condition that Shishi wasn't a freeloader. He then asked Shishi a very practical question: if she knew how to cook instant noodles. Shishi's face immediately brightened, and she happily exclaimed that she knew how. Satisfied with the answer, Gavin smiled, deciding that all three would set off together. Under the city's night streetlights, Gavin declared he was hungry and wanted to eat hot pot, casually asking if Shishi could handle spicy food. 3 days before the icy apocalypse, in a luxurious villa, Yaniel still couldn't hide his fear as he walked beside Gavin. Gavin reassured Yaniel that there was nothing to fear, asserting that they had to convince his father at all costs, because the apocalypse would arrive in 3 days. Sitting on the sofa, Yaniel's father irritably told the two children to stop talking nonsense and kicked them both out. Yaniel frantically tried to convince his father that everything Gavin said was true, that the icy deluge was coming, and it would be too late if they didn't act. However, he still didn't believe them, and angrily shooed the two away, not wanting to be disturbed while enjoying his tea. Suddenly, Gavin reached out his hand and a stream of blue energy enveloped the teacup on the table. Yaniel's father stared blankly at the empty saucer, wondering where his teacup had gone. Gavin smiled and explained that he had taken it, and this was the superpower he had mentioned. Still skeptical, Yaniel's father dismissed it, thinking it was just a cheap magic trick that couldn't fool him. Immediately, a similar stream of energy enveloped the man's entire body. He fell backward in fright as the sofa suddenly vanished from beneath him. Gavin crossed his arms and casually asked if Pan Jingray now believed him. Pan Jingray angrily stood up, hands on his hips, asserting that he would never believe this trick. Without a word, Gavin raised his hand again, and spatial energy once more surged forth. Pan Jingray was flung forward, sprawling onto the empty floor. Still unwilling to give up, he challenged Gavin, saying that if he could make everything in the room disappear, he would believe him. Immediately after the challenge, the entire luxurious living room suddenly became eerily empty. Pan Jingray was stunned, stammering in disbelief that everything had truly vanished, while Gavin confidently asked again if he believed him now. In his shock, Pan Jingray suddenly swung his hand and slapped his son hard across the face. Yaniel clutched his cheek, asking in pain and confusion why his father had hit him. Pan Jingray trembled, telling himself that this wasn't a dream, and finally, he fully believed. The countdown began. Only 2 days remained until the icy apocalypse would strike. Immediately after, a notification appeared on the phone screen, confirming that a colossal sum of $760 million had been transferred to the account. Yaniel Parker cheered with joy, informing Gavin Clark that his father had transferred over $700 million. With a confident smile, Gavin outlined the plan. Yaniel would buy cold-resistant supplies, while he would inspect the villa and search for weapons. The villa had been reinforced and completed, standing tall like an impregnable fortress. Here, Mr. Zhao, the director of the decoration company, proudly presented the work and asked Gavin if he was satisfied. Gavin smiled in appreciation, acknowledging the dedication Mr. Zhao had poured into the project. Mr. Zhao affirmed that this was the most challenging project the company had ever undertaken, a shelter capable of surviving even the apocalypse. After shaking hands and promising to pay the remainder, Gavin saw Mr. Zhao off, but then he suddenly called the man back, seemingly having something important to say. Gavin seriously advised Mr. Zhao to stay home and stock up on food for the next 2 days. When asked if a storm was coming, he simply replied that it was a once-in-a-century superstorm. Mr. Zhao happily complied, seeing it as a good opportunity to rest, completely unaware of the truth. Not long after, trucks laden with goods began to enter the villa's premises. Yaniel excitedly ran over to report that he had bought the best and most expensive supplies. Gavin ordered everything to be moved inside, ready to use his spatial ability to store it all. While the workers were unloading, Liu and her grandson stood nearby, curious, wondering why they had bought so much. The grandson suddenly pointed at a box of candy and insisted that his grandmother get him one. Indulging her grandson, Liu picked up the boy, intending to take an item from the box without permission. Seeing this, Yaniel frantically ran to inform Gavin that they had run into trouble. Yaniel Parker scratched his head in frustration, lamenting that he couldn't possibly spend all the enormous sum of money he was given. Gavin Clark then gave him a new mission: to go to large food warehouses and buy back all the grain, a task Yaniel eagerly accepted. Deep down, Gavin recalled that in his previous life, these very food warehouses had been seized by a group of villains, and he was determined to stop their wicked path this time. Just then, a worker rushed over to report that the final crossbow shipment was being obstructed by an old woman, prompting Gavin to go investigate personally. At the scene, Liu was trying to open a box while her grandson incessantly urged her on, wanting to eat something inside. Gavin suddenly appeared from behind, coldly questioning her actions. Without a hint of shame, Liu turned around and casually asked for a lollipop for her whining grandson. With sharp eyes, Gavin firmly replied that he had no intention of giving anything away for free. Rejected, Liu immediately changed her demeanor, scolding Gavin as stingy and brazenly demanding that he leave all the goods for her. Fed up with the absurdity, Gavin pointed directly and ordered the troublesome neighbor to leave immediately. Liu was furious, declaring herself the vice chair of the neighborhood committee and loudly accusing Gavin of destroying neighborly relations. Taking advantage of the adult's argument, the grandson quickly climbed onto a box and cheered with delight when he grabbed a lollipop. Gavin's anger flared at the sight. He yelled, demanding that Liu immediately get her grandson off his property. The child, far from being scared, even stuck out his tongue to provoke him, calling Gavin a bad guy and threatening to destroy him. Losing all patience, Gavin growled, ordering the insolent child to get down, startling Liu. However, she still blindly defended her grandson, waving her hand and yelling at Gavin to stay away. It was precisely during that chaos that the child lost his balance and fell backward off the stack of boxes. The boy landed in the most ironic way possible, right on the sharp crossbow bolts pointing upward from the broken box. A piercing scream rang out. The child wailed in extreme pain. Liu frantically embraced her grandson, who was screaming because several arrows were stuck in his butt. Gavin Clark merely smirked, thinking it was a well-deserved retribution. Carrying her grandchild away, the woman looked back and threatened to make Gavin pay dearly. From the balcony, Xenia Scott and a friend witnessed the entire incident. Xenia was curious why Gavin bought so many things. Her close friend, Yang Ziqing, scoffed that he was just a madman hoarding supplies uselessly. Yang Ziqing invited Xenia to get beauty treatments, leaving Gavin behind, believing that Zach would deal with him soon. Time waited for no one. Only one day remained until the icy apocalypse. At a logistics park, Yaniel Parker was overwhelmed, thinking about the 5 massive food warehouses they had purchased. Gavin announced the next plan. After meeting Chi Kui, they would go collect grain. Soon after, Chi Kui happily greeted Gavin upon his arrival and asked about her work. She reported that she had been promoted to warehouse supervisor and eagerly asked when she could quit her job. Gavin allowed her to quit tomorrow, making Chi Kui overjoyed and ready to submit her resignation immediately. But he stopped her, saying he needed her help with one last thing, and Chi Kui immediately agreed. Gavin seriously asked her to get him the warehouse keys, because he would be going there tonight. Chi Kui was stunned, not understanding why he wanted to go to the warehouse in the middle of the night. He simply replied that he would explain later and told her to wait for him inside the warehouse. With a firm gaze, Gavin emphasized that she must wait for him and absolutely not tell anyone. Chi Kui began to speculate about Gavin's intentions, while the shelves full of provisions were ready and waiting. Gavin asked Boss Liang to leave so his group could take over, and the warehouse manager obediently handed over the keys. As soon as the manager was out of sight, Yaniel Parker excitedly urged Gavin to start the plan. Immediately, Gavin unleashed his spatial ability, a blue energy enveloping him as he commanded collect. In the blink of an eye, the entire warehouse became empty, leaving Yaniel suspended in mid-air and exclaiming in astonishment at the miraculous disappearance of the mountain of provisions. Gavin explained that his hyperspace had absolute preservation capabilities, keeping all items in their original state even after 100 years. Yaniel deduced that the timeline within it must be 0, but Gavin admitted he wasn't clear on the details either and needed more time to research. Suddenly, Boss Liang returned, saying he had forgotten something and needed to retrieve it. As he stepped inside, he froze, his eyes behind his glasses wide with horror at the unbelievable sight. Standing alone in the vast, empty warehouse, the manager wondered in shock if he was hallucinating, as an entire mountain of goods had vanished in an instant. Night fell, and Gavin continued to another warehouse, knocking decisively. The door opened, and Chi Kui appeared, looking joyful and somewhat shy to see the person she had been waiting for. Gavin seriously warned that what he was about to do would be very shocking, asking her to maintain absolute silence, and Chi Kui obediently agreed. He looked her straight in the eyes, decisively asking if she was ready, before declaring that he would begin. Misunderstanding Gavin's intention, Chi Kui blushed, squeezed her eyes shut, and mumbled her agreement in confusion. Seeing her still dazed, Gavin called out, urging her to quickly follow him. Snapping out of it, Chi Kui hurriedly ran after Gavin deep inside the vast warehouse. Both stood silently before the colossal shelves, piled high with sacks of provisions reaching the ceiling. Gavin raised his hand, thinking to himself that after collecting this batch of goods, his accumulated resources would reach an enormous amount. Once again, the blue spatial energy erupted, ready to swallow everything within its range. A woman witnessed the extraordinary sight. Wondering in astonishment what was happening, she turned to question Gavin, suspecting he was the one who made all the goods disappear. Gavin calmly replied that he would explain later, then urged them both to go to other warehouses. They approached the door of the security surveillance room. Inside, the woman confusedly asked why they were there, surrounded by numerous monitoring screens. Gavin didn't answer, simply raised his hand to unleash energy, commanding all cameras to be disabled. Done with the task, he turned away with a confident smile, promising to explain everything when they returned. Night fell upon the villa, the group's safe haven on the eve of the apocalypse. In the living room, Shishi politely offered her big sis tea, witnessed by Gavin and Yaniel Parker. When Gavin asked if she believed his words, the woman firmly confirmed her trust. Yaniel Parker smiled admiringly, impressed by the unconditional trust she placed in his friend. Gavin solemnly declared that tomorrow was the apocalypse, and from now on, no one was allowed to go outside. Hearing this, the woman quickly asked permission to go out for an errand, and Gavin agreed on the condition that she return before noon tomorrow. The countdown to 0 continued. While in a high-rise building, someone was trying to explain a failure to young Master Young. One-Eyed Dragon explained that they had encountered another group of assassins also targeting Gavin, leading to them accidentally shooting their own comrades. Zach Young contemptuously thought that his patience had run out dealing with such trash. Losing all patience, Zach drew his gun, declaring that this time he would take action himself. In a corner of the park, stray cats and dogs gathered around bowls of food. The woman sat down, sadly bidding them farewell, telling them that the apocalypse was coming and they had to fend for themselves. After bidding farewell to the stray cats and dogs, Chi Kui Kui was unaware that she had fallen into someone else's sights. From a distance, One-Eyed Dragon reported to Zach Young that Gavin Clark was still holed up in the villa, making it difficult for them to act. Zach Young then came up with a malicious idea, assuming Chi Kui Kui was Gavin's girlfriend, and ordering her capture to force him to show himself. In the base, Yaniel Parker received a phone call and screamed in horror. He rushed to inform Gavin that Zach Young had kidnapped Chi Kui Kui, demanding Gavin face him alone. Gavin's eyes turned cold, and he thought to himself that Zach Young was truly asking for death and wouldn't survive until the apocalypse. In a deserted alley, the arranged confrontation took place. Gavin entered alone, facing Zach Young and his subordinates who were holding Chi Kui Kui, and was mocked for his foolishness in coming. Without hesitation, Gavin growled, demanding they release Chi Kui Kui immediately. Two subordinates immediately pushed the girl forward. Chi Kui Kui joyfully called Gavin's name and ran towards him, but just then, Zach Young smirked, coldly drew his gun, and pulled the trigger. Chi Kui Kui turned back, with an expression of extreme horror, at the piercing gunshot. In an instant, Gavin lunged, pulling her down, and the bullet grazed past them by a hair's breadth. Zach Young was stunned, unable to believe his eyes that Gavin had dodged an impossible shot. Gavin helped Chi Kui Kui up. She was still trembling and urged him to flee because they had guns. He smiled reassuringly, telling her not to be afraid, as he would handle everything else. Gavin stood up straight, his sharp gaze fixed on Zach Young, declaring that he would die sooner than planned. Zach Young, enraged, ordered his subordinates to torture Gavin thoroughly, but not to let him die too easily. A muscular subordinate confidently stepped forward, assuring Zach Young that he would deal with Gavin. But in the blink of an eye, Gavin grabbed the thug's face, coldly asking if he had come to die before slamming him hard onto the ground. The subordinate collapsed on the spot, his head embedded in the brick wall, terrifying the other two with Gavin's unimaginable strength. One-Eyed Dragon roared in anger, ordering two more to attack with knives. Gavin calmly dodged the fatal knife thrust from one of them. He easily blocked the attacker's wrist, completely neutralizing the threat. Immediately after, Gavin snatched the knife and stabbed the enemy in the stomach, causing him to scream in pain. With a swift movement, he used the same knife to slash the legs of the other two, making them collapse. Witnessing this, Chi Kui Kui was simply stunned, unable to believe Gavin was so strong. Zach Young was also speechless, not understanding how Gavin possessed such skills, but One-Eyed Dragon quickly reassured him that they still had guns. The one-eyed assassin raised his gun, challenging Gavin to try and dodge a bullet. A shot rang out, but the one hit was One-Eyed Dragon, who looked down in shock at the wound on his chest. Gavin smiled chillingly, the gun in his hand still smoking, admitting that he also had a gun. Zach Young looked in horror at One-Eyed Dragon's corpse falling to the ground. Chi Kui Kui's face turned ashen, stammering as she realized Gavin had just killed someone. Terrified, Zach Young turned and fled for his life. But another shot rang out, hitting him in the leg, causing him to fall headlong. Gavin calmly approached, looked at the man lying on the ground, and asked if he thought he could escape. Cornered, Zach Young pleaded in panic, reminding Gavin that he was the heir to the vast Dragon Corporation. A shot rang out, the bullet hitting Zach Young's leg, making him collapse in pain. Gavin Clark coldly replied to his plea, the gun still smoking. Cornered, Zach panicked, admitted defeat, and begged Gavin to name his price. Gavin smirked and named an astronomical sum. 1 trillion. Zach was stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief at what he had just heard. He yelled that Gavin was joking, as no one could afford such an amount. Gavin immediately taught him a lesson, kicking him straight in the face for his insolence. Beaten black and blue, Zach could only cry out for mercy in vain. But Gavin didn't stop, declaring he would finish him off today. Just then, police sirens wailed, and a voice ordered everyone to freeze. Gavin grabbed Zach by the collar, but the enemy laughed triumphantly, revealing he had called the police earlier. Zach confidently believed Gavin would pay for assault in public. Without warning, Gavin delivered a brutal kick to Zach's groin. Zach let out a pathetic scream, his face contorted in agony from the fatal blow. Amidst the police cordon, Gavin explained that letting Zach die easily before the apocalypse would be too merciful. He turned to face the muzzles, a confident smile on his face, declaring he wouldn't be arrested. To the astonishment of the authorities, Gavin raised his hands in the air, as if surrendering. Then he began a mysterious countdown. 3, 2, 1. Time's up. And as Gavin's words ended, a police officer suddenly froze as the first snowflakes began to fall. The police officers looked up at the sky, stunned by the unbelievable sight. It was snowing. Amidst the widespread confusion over snowfall in summer, Gavin Clark quietly observed the beginning of the apocalypse. The unusual snowflakes quickly blanketed the entire city, transforming the familiar urban landscape into a deadly omen. The temperature plummeted, forcing the police officers to huddle against the bone-chilling cold, as if it were a tangible attack. One of Zach's injured subordinates screamed in agony as sharp ice crystals began to form on his wound. Zach Young, bleeding and shivering from the cold, desperately begged for help as death approached, all under Gavin's impassive gaze. Faced with a life-or-death crisis, the police chief abandoned any thought of arrest and yelled, ordering his subordinates to rescue the injured. When Chi Kui Chui cried out in horror that the apocalypse had truly arrived, Gavin grabbed her hand, urging them both to leave before the temperature dropped even further. A police officer attempted to regain control by pointing his gun at Gavin and ordering him to stop, but he only received a completely unfazed look in return. Gavin calmly warned the officer that if he continued to let his hand touch the freezing metal of the gun, that hand would be completely destroyed. The officer's painful scream proved Gavin's warning correct, as he dropped the weapon, his hand numb from the extreme cold. Crouching before his defeated opponent, Gavin mocked Zach Young, reiterating his promise that Zach would never catch him. Zach Young begged for his life, terrified that his legs would soon freeze and break off if he was left in the cold. With a final, chilling declaration for Zach to enjoy the apocalypse, Gavin turned and walked away, abandoning his enemy to a slow and painful death. As they walked through the snow-covered streets, they passed unprepared citizens screaming in panic, realizing this was a terrifying natural disaster. Chi Kui Chui, now wearing a warm jacket, expressed astonishment that everything Gavin had said was coming true, but he replied decisively that this was only the beginning. She looked at him with an anxious expression, asking how long this ice age would last. Gavin replied curtly, asserting that he did not know. However, in his mind, he recalled the horrifying truth from his previous life. At the time of his death, the icy apocalypse had lasted for a full year with no sign of ending. Amidst the chaos of people fighting over warm clothes for survival, Gavin and Chi Kui Kui silently observed the initial collapse of social order. Chi Kui Kui realized in horror that social order was collapsing, but Gavin knew a darker truth. It was human nature that would truly disappear. Immediately after, two strangers wielding knives blocked their path, brazenly demanding that Gavin and Chi Kui Kui take off their warm clothes. Gavin remained unfazed, his eyes sharp as ice, warning them that they were seeking death. Angered by his arrogance, the two thugs rushed forward simultaneously, determined to teach him a lesson with their knives. However, Gavin easily knocked one of them down with a devastating punch, demonstrating his superior physical strength. Before the remaining thug could react, the cold muzzle of a gun was pressed directly against his head. Gavin held the newly acquired gun, calmly asking his opponent if he was still being arrogant. Facing death, the thug immediately changed his tune, utterly terrified and stammering that Gavin was being incredibly humble. Afterward, the group safely returned to the sheltered villa, where snow had covered everything. In contrast to the chaos outside, Yaniel Parker blissfully enjoyed a hot pot meal amidst the freezing weather. Meanwhile, Gavin seriously instructed Yaniel and Chi Kui Kui that from now on, they absolutely must not open the door for anyone. The TV news broadcast announced the global cold snap, calling on citizens to maintain order and wait in vain. Gavin scrolled through his phone and smiled upon seeing the neighborhood group chat was extremely lively. On the screen, residents were frantically discussing the sudden weather change in the middle of summer. A fortune teller declared it a natural disaster, while a lawyer also advised everyone to stockpile necessities. Amidst the chaos, Auntie Lou loudly called for everyone to trust the authorities and criticized those who hoarded goods as troublemakers. Reading those naive messages, Gavin merely smirked. Finally, he sent a single message to the group. If you plan to stockpile a lot. Reading Auntie Liu's naive criticisms and reassurances in the group chat, Gavin silently cursed, "Idiot." 3 days later, the snow continued to fall relentlessly, and the outside temperature had dropped to a terrifying -60 degrees Celsius. Standing next to Yaniel Parker, Chi Kui Kui worried about the fate of those who hadn't prepared in time, fearing they would starve to death. In contrast to his two friends' anxiety, Gavin remained calm behind them, scrolling through his phone with a knowing smile. In the neighborhood group chat, panic peaked, and Auntie Lou announced she would lead people to inspect each household's reserves. Suddenly, a knock echoed at the door. Gavin spoke up, asking who it was, while Yaniel and Chi Kui Kui looked alert. Outside, a voice rang out, claiming to be from the community, coming to bring warmth. Gavin sneered, replying sarcastically to the offer that it was already warm enough inside. When the person outside identified herself as Auntie Liu and demanded the door be opened, Gavin flatly refused, citing the reason that he didn't want the cold air to rush in. Losing all patience, Auntie Liu yelled, threatening Gavin for daring to defy the organization. Hearing Gavin's seemingly submissive tone, Auntie Liu triumphantly demanded that he open the door immediately. But immediately afterward, Gavin burst out laughing, declaring that he was challenging her directly. Humiliated, Auntie Liu flushed with rage and screamed curses. Powerless, the man accompanying her asked Auntie Liu what to do. She decided to shift their target to another house, determined to find food for her nephew. Witnessing everything, Gavin merely smirked, realizing that the evil nature of humanity was beginning to reveal itself after just 3 days of the apocalypse. Meanwhile, at another villa, the scene was also engulfed in a snowstorm. Xenia Scott's mother panicked upon realizing they only had enough food for 3 days, but Xenia replied that Zach Young couldn't come to help. Faced with her mother's despair, Xenia conceived the idea of using money to buy up supplies from others before prices skyrocketed. Immediately, Xenia used money to manipulate the group chat, buying all of one neighbor's food at an exorbitant price and beginning to establish her own black market. In the cozy villa, when Shishi's guardian called him for dinner, Gavin looked at his phone and smirked inwardly, acknowledging that Xenia Scott was not foolish for having stockpiled supplies beforehand. He thought to himself that in just a few more days, those who had sold their supplies would surely regret it to their dying breath. 3 days later, snow covered everything, signaling a true ice age. In a cold room, Hunter Walsh's group huddled under blankets as the outside temperature had dropped to tens of degrees below zero, with no sign of warming up. Sharon Zeller desperately turned to Hunter, fearing that the entire group would starve now that their food supply was completely exhausted. One subordinate couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up and yelled, deciding that they all had to go out and loot to survive. Suddenly, another subordinate spotted the name Gavin Original in the community group chat, and suspiciously asked Sharon if that was their target. Sharon Zeller was stunned, confirming that it was indeed Gavin, unable to believe that he also lived in the same neighborhood. Hunter Walsh flashed a sinister smile, ordering his subordinate to immediately message Gavin and demand that he bring the food himself. Meanwhile, in the gym of the safe villa, Gavin was instructing Shishi in her training, demanding that she hold her posture for half an hour. With a determined look, Shishi asserted that she would definitely pass the test. Seeing Shishi train hard, Yaniel Parker was also inspired, telling himself he should start training too, as times had changed. Gavin encouraged his friend, suggesting Yaniel could train with Shishi, and promising that his cultivation method would put them ahead of the rest of humanity. After a short while, Yaniel could no longer endure it. He collapsed onto the floor, exhausted, and claimed he needed to eat a lobster to recover, while Zishi tenaciously maintained her pose. Just then, Gavin's phone vibrated, catching his attention. On the screen was a threatening message from a stranger, claiming to be Hunter's subordinate and demanding he bring food. After reading the message, a contemptuous smile flickered across Gavin's lips. He casually sent back a single reply. Idiot. Gavin mused that the timeline seemed to have changed, as Hunter Walsh and his cronies hadn't lived in this residential area in his previous life. In another villa, someone was impatiently waiting for Gavin's message. The red-haired subordinate nervously reported that Gavin had replied, prompting Hunter Walsh to ask for details. Upon hearing the message that insulted Hunter as an idiot, the leader was so enraged that he spat out the water he was drinking. Another subordinate angrily stood up, roaring for his comrades to grab their weapons and deal with Gavin. Outside, the wind and snow continued to howl relentlessly over the luxurious rooftops. Meanwhile, Xenia's mother worried about the nearly empty refrigerator, but Xenia calmly reassured her that Zach Young would arrive soon and even wanted to kill Gavin. Suddenly, she remembered something important and asked her daughter about Gavin's stockpiling of a large amount of supplies before the apocalypse. Xenia confirmed her memory, recalling how dozens of large trucks had continuously delivered goods to him. The mother astonishingly hypothesized whether Gavin had known about the disaster in advance, but Xenia immediately dismissed it, thinking such a lovesick person couldn't possibly have known. With a calculating expression, Xenia's mother suggested that if Zach didn't arrive soon, they shouldn't let Gavin's supply cache go to waste. Xenia flashed a confident, cunning smile, asserting that she knew how to make the lovesick fool bring the supplies to their doorstep himself. Not long after, 4 of Hunter's subordinates, brandishing weapons, arrived at Gavin's villa. Inside, Yaniel Parker spotted the strangers on the security monitor and alerted Gavin in a panic. Gavin, on the other hand, remained completely calm, smiling and reassuring his friend that it was just Hunter's group, led by Hunter Walsh, the group aggressively pounded on the door, roaring for Gavin to show himself. Gavin stood with his arms crossed at the door, his tone defiant, and flatly told them to leave. The refusal enraged Hunter, who shouted threats to break down the door and make Gavin regret not kneeling and begging. Gavin merely smirked, holding a remote control, and declared he would wash the opponent's filthy mouth clean. Gavin activated the defense system, drenching Hunter Walsh's group standing outside the door with a blast of icy water. Soaked in the freezing weather, the group shivered uncontrollably. One man yelling to break down the door while another complained he was stiff with cold. Unable to withstand the cold, Hunter and his cronies were forced to retreat, dropping their weapons on the frozen ground and shouting threats of revenge. Meanwhile, Yaniel Parker chuckled gleefully, watching their pathetic state on the security monitor, hoping they would freeze to death. Gavin calmly announced that it had been 7 days since the apocalypse began, and they would be going out tonight, making Yaniel ask the reason in surprise. With a knowing smile, Gavin revealed his objective. It was time for the next meteor showers to appear. Just then, his phone chimed with a notification, and Yaniel excitedly remarked that he didn't want to miss this astronomical event. However, Gavin looked disgusted to see that the sender was Xenia Scott, wondering why she was contacting him. On the screen were 2 messages from Xenia, asking if he was there and expressing a desire to talk. Completely dismissive, Gavin tossed the phone to Yaniel, muttering curses about her being an idiot. In another luxurious villa, Xenia's mother asked her daughter if Gavin had replied yet. Xenia confidently reassured her mother that since she had initiated contact, Gavin would surely be delighted and reply immediately. However, half an hour passed, and the phone in Xenia's hand remained disturbingly silent. Her confidence quickly turned into rage. She bit her nails, unable to believe Gavin dared to ignore her. At the same time, at their temporary shelter, Hunter Walsh yelled from the cold, demanding his subordinates make the fire burn hotter. He and his cronies shivered under thick blankets, lamenting that they had nearly frozen to death in the harsh, outside cold. With hateful eyes, Hunter gritted his teeth and vowed that next time he would prepare thoroughly to break down the door, strip Gavin naked, and throw him out into the snow to die. 2 hours later, Xenia's mother inquired again impatiently, only to receive a frustrated no from her daughter. She tried to justify it as male pride, but Xenia had a new plan, deciding to send a voice message, believing her voice would make Gavin unable to refuse. With a confident smile, Xenia Scott sent a voice message, feigning concern for Gavin's situation. Gavin's phone displayed a notification for the voice message he had just received from her. Looking at the screen, Gavin smirked, thinking that since he was bored, he would play along with Xenia's little drama. He brought the phone close and sent a provocative reply. "What, Miss Daddy?" Xenia triumphantly assumed Gavin was still the same easily manipulated lovesick fool, while her mother hastily urged her daughter to ask him to send food over. Both mother and daughter were stunned into silence upon hearing Gavin's humiliating reply. Overcome with rage and shame, Xenia screamed and violently threw the phone to the floor. Meanwhile, the neighborhood chat group was in chaos due to food shortages, and Auntie Liu took the opportunity to announce she would be collecting everyone's food. Gavin merely sneered, well aware that this was a brazen scheme to deceive the neighbors. Yaniel Parker looked out the window, reminding Gavin that it was completely dark now. Gavin then declared it was time, asking Yaniel, Chi Kui Kui, Chi Shi, and her guardian, to dress warmly to go out together. He was determined to find the meteor about to fall into the residential area, believing that the more people, the higher the chance of success. For the first time since the apocalypse began, the group stepped out into the snowy weather, and Yaniel couldn't help but shiver from the bone-chilling cold. Gavin instructed everyone to pay close attention, as 2 meteorites would fall tonight and they had to seize the opportunity. Suddenly, he saw Auntie Liu and 2 other men using loudspeakers to call for donations of supplies. She yelled, revealing her true intention was to get food for her starving grandson. Yaniel was disgusted by Auntie Liu's shamelessness, while Gavin quietly observed. One of the men with Auntie Liu suddenly spotted Gavin's group and quickly pointed them out. Recognizing Gavin, Auntie Liu flashed a wicked smile, delighted that she had finally caught the stubborn person who refused to open the door last time.